good? Welcome back. Truth and Transparencies here. Scott Peterson, episode 4. Episode 4. This is the factual section. So, let me get what I want out of here. Here we go. Be prepared to get blown. Factual. Again, guys, do me a favor. At some point, you are going to have an opinion. Use the comment section of the video or use the comment section of the live feed. Talk amongst yourselves. Let's go. These are things that we would have never heard because we were never in that courtroom. So 184 witnesses, 23 weeks, and yeah. Again, this is the factual overview section of the 659 pages. So Scott Peterson was born and raised in the San Diego area. Lacey, she was born and raised actually in Modesto, so that's her hometown. They met in 1994 when they were both living in San Luis. So Lacey was attending college at Cal Poly, and then Scott was working, and he would actually later attend and graduate from the same Cal Poly. Over the next 3 years, Lacey and Scott steadily dated, became engaged, and married in August of 1997. Lacey graduated from college that same year in 1997, and then Scott graduated the year after in 98. After graduation, they started and ran a popular college hangout. It was called The Shack. Scott did the cooking and Lacey worked up front. When working at The Shack, Scott cleaned the grease traps, fryers, fixed the plumbing, and scrubbed the bathrooms, among other tasks. So his clothes were often dirty and stinky at the end of the night. Lacey pointed this out to Scott, that some of her nicer garments that were in the hamper were getting ruined by his greasy clothes. Now, let me tell you guys something about that. 100%, this is factual. When I owned and operated my own bar, depending on what part of the restaurant you would be working in, your clothes literally will smell like you can work so hard to try to get shit out of it, but it will ruin stuff. So that's why bartending, you never want to get back in the kitchen area and be back there for an extended period of time. Yeah, no. So if you're doing stuff like that at a bar, 100%, and you're working with food, you don't want that to mix with the other stuff. So now the Petersons buy a home on Covina Avenue. So in 2000, Scott and Lacey sold the shack and moved to Modesto, where Lacey grew up and still had family. They lived with Lacey's mom and her stepfather for actually several weeks before renting and then buying a home. And that's the house that the disappearance. So in October of 2000 is when they bought it. Lacey worked as a marketing representative for Southern Wine and Spirits and then as a substitute teacher. Scott worked as a manager for Trade Corp, a company that distributes fertilizer and agricultural biostimulants. A big part of their life was home improvement projects. People like to do this stuff on the weekends with their spouses. So Scott and Lacey worked together to upgrade their home by putting in a swimming pool and built-in outdoor barbecue. They repainted the interior, added new landscaping to the backyard, upgraded the powder room, and made other upgrades to the home. Scott was a self-taught woodworker. He kept his woodworking equipment at the warehouse where his office was located. When he was at the warehouse, he also had a flatbed trailer that he would use as a makeshift workbench. So he had a router table, a table saw, a bandsaw, all the stuff that all those guys have. Lacey would find pieces of furniture that she liked, and Scott would use his woodworking skills to try and create them for her. So, picture below is a sideboard that Scott built for their dining room and a copper frame he made for the mirror above it. The reason all of this is important is because it goes towards, so what I'm going to show you guys here is I'll bring in good old Hector, is it goes towards very, very important parts of, so in this amazing document. So it would go through and show these are the different things that he would make, Scott would make. So when they learned that Lacey was pregnant, she designed the nursery, and then they worked together to get it ready for the baby's arrival. They decided to go with a nautical theme. Scott did all of the painting and helped Lacey get the furnishings that she wanted. Lacey saw a table in the magazine she liked and wanted for Connor's nursery, so Scott made the table for her, and I just showed you guys that. Scott and Lacey's family and friends testified that Scott was excited about becoming a father, and there's plenty of reference here to all the people that did testify, and what they were doing here in this document is they would be pointing that out with the reference pages. So from the transcripts. So Scott and Lacey found a dresser and fixed it up, repainted it, things of that nature. When Scott and Lacey went to San Diego to spend Thanksgiving in 2002, so that's the year that she went missing, is right there, the Christmas of 2003. So they went to spend Thanksgiving with Scott's family in San Diego. Lacey, Scott, and the family, they went shopping and found the decorative lifesaver ring for the nursery. Brent, which is Lacey's brother, Eric Olson, and Gary Reed all testified that Scott was looking forward to the baby's arrival. Brent, her brother, Lacey's brother, testified that Scott was excited, in quotes, to have a baby, and that one of Scott's goals was to have a family. Olson testified that Scott was happy about the pregnancy. Gregory Reed confirmed this, who was a neighbor. He had spoken with Scott many times about his, him having a baby, and Scott seemed excited. Reed's wife, Kristen, was pregnant at the same time as Lacey, and all four had taken a birthing class together. All right. Now, the prosecution argued that Scott killed Lacey because he did not want to become a father, and supported its theory through the testimony of Scott's sister-in-law, Rose, who stated that when she asked Scott if he was ready to have a family, he said, in quotes, or she said, in quotes, that he said, "I was kind of hoping for infertility." On cross-examination, Rose admitted that she did not relay that Scott's comment to the police when she was first ever interviewed by police, but that after the news of his extramarital affair broke, it was hard to read Scott, and she told Detective Grogan about this comment. But she also said that it may have been a joke. Indeed, Scott was continuing to put up shelves and prepare for the nursery for Connor's arrival right up to the time that Lacey was abducted, as shown by his putting up the new shelves, and that was a picture. So, and that was on December 22nd, 2 days before Lacey and Connor vanished. Now, in addition, on December 23rd, Scott paid the premium for Lacey's Blue Shield medical insurance. So if you're going to kill somebody and you're planning on killing somebody, why are you paying for the premium? Scott and Lacey liked to socialize with friends. They did not do drugs, engage in high-risk behaviors, or have any psychological problems. In fact, Lacey's mom said she thought the world of Scott. She has never seen him violent with Lacey or even raise his voice. One of the cornerstones of the prosecution's case was their contention that Scott made multiple concrete anchors at his warehouse and used them to weigh down Lacey's body when he put her in the bay. No evidence of any such weights or anchors was ever found, despite months of searching the shallow waters where Scott fished. The prosecution pointed out to photos taken on Scott's flatbed trailer, which he used as a workbench, and argued that the concrete debris debris. On the workbench was evidence that he made multiple anchors. Scott explained to the police that he had made only one concrete anchor to use with the fishing boat, and that the debris on the workbench was there because he was working on other projects that involved mixing cement. In September of 2002, Scott and Lacey agreed with their neighbors, the Dungers, who lived the house behind the property, that they would share the cost of a new fence dividing the properties because the one that was in place was in disrepair. Scott agreed to do the labor for free of charge and split the cost of the materials with the neighbors. So the project involved purchasing 10 pressure, so it's going on about this, all the stuff that they had to buy. Here is this was found on the home computer of the Petersons. Put Scott's face there. Okay. So Scott returned those. He had to return 3 80-pound bags of mix. So he did that on November 1st to Lowe's. Scott used his flatbed trailer to haul the building supplies he bought for the fence, and the project included the bags of concrete mix. A man named Doug Phelps told police he had seen Scott's trailer loaded with supplies in September of 2002, and that he saw Scott driving his truck, pulling the flatbed trailer. So this is all just to prove, like, hey, all this cement that you're talking about, okay, and everything that was at the warehouse, this is because this is the fence all around the back of the house. And then this is the stuff that was at. So what they went ahead and showed, the Innocence Project, was like, when you actually go to the stores that actually sell the cement mix, this is what it looks like around it always. Okay, that does not mean that they're for anchors. Okay, everybody knows that, like, it's kind of like mulch when it starts coming out of the bag. All right, it falls around. So now, this is what they showed at trial. Okay, they took this picture, and he's like, look at this. These are little anchors. Look at this. Look at this. And it's like, are you out of your mind? These are little anchors. So the Innocence Project says, after the fence project was completed, Lacey asked Scott to make some concrete-topped patio tables she had seen in a magazine that she wanted to use by the pool. So he showed right here, like, made that. Okay. Then okay. Scott explained to Detective Grogan in January 3rd of 2003 in his interview at the police station that he had worked on other projects at the warehouse that involved mixing cement. He believed he specifically told Detective Grogan about the concrete table he made. Scott had built a wooden frame to use as a mold for the concrete table using, and so another picture. This is all in this amazing 569 pages. So now the video recording of Grogan's January 3rd, 2003 interview with Scott was not checked into evidence until 1 year later when it was found in the desk drawer of CSO Veronica Holmes after Scott had already been bound over for trial. They couldn't even use it for the preliminary hearing. Detective Grogan testified that the audio portion of the videotape interview he conducted on January 3rd at the police station was inaudible due to poor quality, but he acknowledged that they discussed Scott's concrete projects during that interview. In Grogan's written report of the interview, he stated that he asked Scott how large the bag of cement mix was that he bought and used to make the boat anchor, and that Scott held his hands apart and kind of gave a distance like this of approximately 2 feet, indicating the approximate size of a 90-pound bag of cement. As retired LAPD Lieutenant Detective Adam Baravaki explains in his declaration, who is for Scott Peterson's side here, it is concerning and difficult to understand how the police were not recording their interviews with Scott. Police conducted interviews with Scott on December 24th, 25th, 26th, and January 3rd, which were not recorded. Not recorded. They were not recorded. Now think about that. Including interviews at the police station. At that point, police already suspected he was responsible for his wife's disappearance. Had executed a search warrant on his warehouse, boat, truck, and their home, and had him under constant surveillance. In fact, see the dog scent handler Eloise Anderson's testimony, and she said on the stand that she knew as early as December 26th that MPD believed Scott had put Lacey's dead body into his truck and driven it to the bay. Police were clearly putting pressure on Scott to confess. It is hard to believe that Detective Grogan would not have taken every precaution to ensure any confession that may have been forthcoming would be captured. So that's why I believe, and I think the Innocence Project believes it, but the way that they have to say it, they can't just come out and accuse him of he recorded it, but he just buried it because of how like awesome they actually were for Scott. So instead, you just kind of show like let the judge, realize what you're saying without saying it. Now, the image above shows an example of a larger version of the kind of table that Scott was attempting to build, but instead of chicken wire, the builder in the example below is using this rebar. So the photo also shows the wood frame that is held together by screws, which the builder is using as a mold for the concrete table. So Scott was trying to make a table and it failed. Okay. And so his stuff looked like this as well. It was like all over. So there's nothing like it's somebody that is handy and builds shit. Like what the fuck? The project made a mess and had to be thrown out. One of the projects that he tried. So that was a picture of that. These were other pictures that they used in court. So again, this is the flatbed, and this is just showing that it's where he used the flatbed of this trailer for his like tabletop of where he was doing his projects. Eric Olson testified at trial that when he came to the warehouse in the middle to the end of November, he saw the partial bag of concrete that was open and partially used sitting next to the flatbed trailer, further corroborating that Scott's concrete table project was underway around that same time. The prosecution argued that Scott said he took a 90-pound bag of cement and made small little anchor. He said that that's the only anchor he made. You can see it's small and round. That is not what the evidence showed, however. Grogan testified he did not recall Scott saying whether it was a 60 or 90-pound bag of cement. The jury did not hear any of the explanations above for the presence of cement or concrete debris on Scott's workbench and was left with the impression the cement debris was evidence that Scott had made multiple anchors to use to cover a crime. Now, the Petersons' financial picture. It was very sound. Scott and Lacey's financial picture was very good. They were living within their means, and they typically spent less than they earned each month. After monthly expenses each month, they had about $2,300 in disposable income. Scott, who took care of the monthly bills, always paid their credit card bills and car loan on time, and many credit card carried a zero balance. Scott paid extra on their mortgage each month. An accountant from Scott's employer testified that Scott was set to receive a monthly raise from $5,000 a month to $5,300 a month in January of 2003. Lacey was set to inherit about $160,000 from the sale of her grandparents' home, which she would have access to when she turned 30, 3 years after the death. But if she were to proceed or predecease Scott and had no living children, her $160,000, it would actually go to her brother Brent and her sister Amy. It did not pass to Scott. There was also a separate Rocha family trust worth $2.4 million from the estate of Lacey's grandfather. Under the terms of this trust, upon the death of Lacey's grandfather, the trust would be distributed to his 3 grandchildren, Lacey, Brent, and Amy. As with Lacey's share of the funds from the sale of her grandparents' house, Lacey's trust share was to go to Brent and Amy unless she had living children at her time of death. Otherwise, it did not pass. It would never pass to Scott. So Lacey knew the provisions of the trust, and there was no evidence that she kept this information from Scott. Lacey's brother, Brent, acknowledged that there was no financial motive for Scott to kill Lacey at trial. Now, what's this talk about life insurance? Well, in 2001, Brian Ulrich, a friend of Lacey and Scott, obtained his financial investor's license and asked Scott and Lacey to meet with him about financial planning and life insurance. So this is 2001. Brian recommended that they each purchase a life insurance policy, and in April of 2001, they each purchased a policy for $250,000. Scott voluntarily explained to police all of that information about their life insurance on December 25th, 2002, when he was interviewed at the police station. After Lacey's disappearance, Scott never called Brian or his office asking about the life insurance money. Not once. Not once. So, for example, in the Brian Drake case, Jennifer Drake called 13 times. Scott Peterson never called one time. Lacey worked to keep the neighborhood safe. Now, this is something that I think everybody should know about. Lacey was actively involved in community efforts to protect their La Loma neighborhood. La Loma. My Sharona. So La Loma neighborhood, and keep it safe. She worked to block an effort to open up Encina Avenue. They wanted to have cross traffic, and she's like, no way. We have to keep this closed. So she was an advocate for the city not opening up Encina and creating more traffic. Scott helped Lacey videotape traffic patterns in La Loma neighborhood. Like, wow, like who's going to get involved with something like that, right? Well, that's really important to understand that Lacey was very much an advocate of the area, very involved. And so she spoke her mind. Lacey had concerns about the transients in the area, and Scott would come. Hold on one second. Okay, so Lacey had concerns about transients. She and Scott would come across when walking in the park. She had also heard about sexual assaults happening in the park. When Scott and Lacey saw transients in the park, they would yell at them and tell them to move on, or they would call the police. So Lacey and Scott were cop callers. Look out. When Scott and Lacey, I'm sorry, now this is a big part. Judge Richard Cordova lived very near Scott and Lacey and knew them through their work with the Planning Commission and the City Council. Judge Cordova testified that Lacey told him some of the things she was doing in terms of confronting people in the park, and the boldness of what she was doing caused him concern. On September 5th, 2002, so this would be just a couple months before the disappearance, so September, because she was abducted and taken on the 25th of, or the 24th of December. So this is on September 5th of 2002 and October 31st of 2002. Lacey contacted Robert Ford, project coordinator for the city of Modesto Park Recreations and Neighborhoods, requesting, in quotes, that the city close off the trail access to Covina Avenue, located at the end of her street. Why? Because there was undesirable activity going on at the entrance of the park. And it was full of trash and graffiti that needed to be cleaned up. So Ford told Lacey the city wanted to keep the park entrance open, but he recommended some vegetation trimming for visibility, graffiti and trash cleanup, and the installation of a street light at the end of Covina. Just a couple of weeks before Lacey went missing, neighbor Eichard, last name, who lived 2 doors just south of the Petersons, heard Lacey yelling at 2 women outside of the street to stop fighting and that kind of behavior would not be tolerated in this neighborhood. Lacey was she just didn't give a fuck. Like, what are you doing? Come on now. But this neighbor, Eichard, told the police that he heard Lacey yelling from inside his house with his windows closed. Lacey's concerns about safety in the neighborhood were valid. Judge Cordova, who lived, again, right around the corner from the Petersons and near the park entrance, testified that at around 10 p.m. on December 23rd, 2002, so the night before, Lacey would disappear. A man knocked on his door saying that he was staying at a house on or near the corner of Covina in the Edgebrook area. So the man claimed to need money to help his girlfriend whose car had broken down. Judge Cordova thought he was probably just casing the neighborhood to see who was home or not. It was just before Christmas, and that seems to be a prime time for burglaries. Judge Cordova was a former public defender who had come across people running similar scams. He spoke to one of his neighbors who indicated that the same man had come to his house that night. He reported the incident to the police because he thought it may have been significant since it happened the night before Lacey went missing. This is a footer here. Defense investigator Carl Jensen interviewed Judge Cordova's neighbor Albert and his friend Katie Hines, and they said that a man had come to their door the night of December 23rd. So just backing it all up. On the morning of December 25th, the judge showed the officer Detective Banks the house where the man who knocked on the door claimed to be staying, which was about 150 feet away from the Petersons' home. As Judge Cordova was walking with Detective Banks to show him the house where the man said he was staying, he noticed a pair of women's sandals with a flower pattern on them lying in the roadway, and Detective Banks, he wondered if the sandal had anything to do with Lacey's disappearance. He told them, he's like, hey, Detective Banks did not collect the sandals. He left the sandals there. Judge Cordova saw the sandals still laying in the street a few days later. Judge Cordova later showed defense investigator Carl Jensen the location where he saw the sandals. So this was a picture of that. Let's make it bigger for you guys. So this was the Petersons' home right there. And then it was right off here at the corner. Nothing to see here. Again, Judge Cordova later showed that location to the defense investigator Carl Jensen. Now, see that puppy right there? Yeah, about that. Well, as looking like the sandal he saw in the street, and that Scott identified the same sandals as looking like the sandals of Lacey that were missing from their home after she disappeared. So these sandals were missing and from the home after she disappeared. And Scott was like, yeah, she's missing those sandals. And then the judge was like, yeah, those look like the sandals. Okay. Now, on December 26, 2002, Diane Campos called the police to report that she believed she saw Lacey walking a golden retriever that was constantly barking in the park on December 24th, and that two white males were harassing her, telling her to shut the fucking dog up. No one from MPD ever interviewed Campos in person to follow up on her report. Here's some footers here. Detective Owen testified at the preliminary hearing that he interviewed Campos over the phone and felt that the information she provided on December 26, quote unquote, wasn't going in the right direction. He felt more that she had been reading reports, end quotes. Detective Owen did not explain what the quote unquote the right direction would have been in MPD's missing persons investigation, which was barely 48 hours old at that point. But other evidence in the record shows that the police were already locked onto Scott as their primary suspect. Doctor visits, due dates, Connor's gestational age, as I talked about. Lacey's doctor explained that there were two ways to assess all of that, and he explained that you can use ultrasounds. You can those are usually the most accurate, but so the doctor also testified that the first ultrasound conducted at 10 weeks is more accurate in assessing the gestational age than the later ultrasound. So Dr. DeVore said the first trimester ultrasound is the most useful. It's the most accurate from an ultrasound perspective as far as determining the age. So on August 20th, 2002, Lacey had a routine doctor visit, which Scott also attended. An ultrasound was performed at that visit, but it was not for purposes of assessing any of that. On September 24th, Lacey's doctor performed a second ultrasound at 20 weeks. Now, Campos, by the way, the girl that was said she saw Lacey, Campos' report was never discredited by police. By the way, Detective Broccini testified falsely that he had, quote unquote, no information. Anybody came forward and said that they saw Lacey walk in the park. I never had information that Lacey was seen walking in the park, is his testimony. He also testified that he, quote unquote, can't say for sure who was in charge of following up on information about the Peterson's dog being seen in the park, barking like crazy, but it was not something he followed up on. This is ridiculous. At trial, the prosecution's expert, Dr. Gregory DeVore, testified that when the LMP calculation of gestational age is corroborated by the ultrasound, it is considered, quote unquote, the gold standard in determining the gestational age of the fetus, with the only more precise method of measuring by gestation age being in vitro fertilization, which provides an exact date of conception. Now, on December 23rd, 2004, the day before Lacey was reported missing, she and Scott attended another routine prenatal OBGYN appointment together. Imagine that. You don't hear about that, do we? Do we ever hear about that? December 23rd. Wow. Lacey did not raise any complaints or concerns. The doctor told Lacey to follow up in 3 weeks. Lacey had no complaints about dizziness at that point, at that appointment. Lacey's due date was still for February 10th, 2003. So Lacey was doing prenatal yoga and attended a weekly Lamaze class together with Scott. Now, Lacey was walking to stay fit. So in this footer here, the more likely reason that Lacey's sighting witnesses were not interviewed is because by not interviewing them, the police could continue its pressure campaign to get Scott to confess by obtaining search warrants, wiretappings, GPS tracking devices, and poll cameras. So he was under constant surveillance on the ground that no one had made a positive identification of Lacey Peterson since Scott had last seen her. The prosecution argued at trial that no one saw Lacey walking the morning of December 24th because she had stopped walking. Since, quote unquote, she was tired a lot, it was hard to walk, end quote. It was one of the explanations the prosecution offered to explain why police officers refused to interview that many eyewitnesses who reported seeing Lacey or a pregnant woman fitting her description walking a golden retriever in the Loma neighborhood the morning of December 24th. Fucking believable. The retired LAPD lieutenant who was got by the Innocence Project to support their case here. He said that he explains in his declaration that Detective Grogan's missing persons investigation failed to comport with the basic police procedures and practices in place at the time, which made establishing a reliable timeline of the missing person's last known whereabouts a priority, including immediately interviewing witnesses who may have seen the missing person. Lacey walked frequently throughout her pregnancy, daily, almost daily, including within the last couple days before she was reportedly missing, because she was conscious of her weight and staying fit during pregnancy. Detective Broccini testified he interviewed Lacey's good friend, Kristen Reed, on September 12th, 2003, 5 months after Scott was arrested. And he learned that Lacey had, in fact, been walking to stay fit in December around the time she went missing. Reed confirmed that while Lacey had stopped walking for a while due to dizziness after Thanksgiving, though, that very 1st of December, she was back at it because she was overconscious of her weight that she had gained. They tried to tell the jury, like, come on, guys, she wasn't even walking then. She's pregnant and she's big and her feet are sore. All just a bunch of shit. Now, Detective Broccini admitted that he did not reconsider MPD's working theory that Lacey was no longer walking for exercise when he learned that information from Kristen Reed, nor did he interview any of the eyewitnesses who reported seeing Lacey or a pregnant woman, walking a golden retriever. No, that's okay. The evidence also showed that the week before Lacey's disappearance, Lacey and Scott spent a few days in Carmel, California with Scott's parents, Lee and Jackie Peterson. And Lee and Jackie both testified that Lacey walked for several hours around the town shopping and then walked down to the beach and back up to the hill, which was about 3/4 mile of a walk, to their hotel. A photo taken of Scott and Lacey after walking down to the beach. Right here. Look at these people. Look at this shit. What is up on Civil Law? Good to see you in here. Meow. The cats meow. In closing, the prosecution argued that Lee and Jackie Peterson were lying about Lacey walking around and shopping with Jackie while they were in Cali. Lacey and Mrs. Peterson did probably drive around town. They probably drove down to the beach. They probably drove up to the shopping center. But those folks were not walking around up and down those hills for 2 hours. It just didn't happen. That is what was quoted by the prosecution at that trial. Hello, my love. How have you been, buddy? Coming in, hearing some Peterson for you? Lacey walked the neighborhood as well as the park. There is no record of Broccini ever asking Scott what route Lacey or he and Lacey typically took when walking the dog on the residential streets in the neighborhood. Scott did tell him on the 24th that she would take a route towards the tennis courts and then do a loop about a mile back to the house, which took about 45 minutes. So often walking this loop with Lacey and Mackenzie, so he knew it. On December 25th, 2002, Scott told police that Lacey was going to walk the dog in the park because that is what she told him. Judge Hill, by the way, this is a footer here. Judge Hill ordered the prosecution to turn over recordings of the interviews that police conducted with Scott at the police station on December 25th, 2002 and January 3rd of 2003. The prosecution contends that those interviews were not recorded to this day. Who wouldn't be recording those interviews? Detective Broccini also interviewed Scott for 3.5 hours on December 24th before taking him to the police station. None of Scott's statements to the police were recorded during that 3.5 hour period. Broccini admitted his written report did not accurately capture what Scott did and said that night. Police again interviewed Scott at his home on December 26, 2002, and again did not record the interview. On December 25th, Scott again agreed to be interviewed by Detective Grogan and Doug Mansfield, who was with the California Department of Justice at the police station in Modesto. Mansfield conducted a 3-hour pre-polygraph interview with Scott, but did not audio record or videotape the interview. Are you kidding me? Nor did he file a written report documenting the 3-hour interview. This was under, like, he testified to this. Like, what were these jurors doing? Grogan testified the interview was, quote unquote, was not in a room where it could have been videotaped, but did not state where the interview took place. Well, if it's not in, what? Were you guys in the bathroom? You guys in the bathroom? Why wasn't mainstream media reporting any of this? This is all testimony. Like, what's going on? You know? Okay. Now, so DOJ polygraph examiner Doug Mansfield testified that when he interviewed Scott at the police station on December 25th, you know, the unrecorded one, Scott did not say Lacey walked the dog on surface streets, but it does not appear he was asked that question. On December 26, 2002, the dog handler, Captain Christopher Breuer, and Detective Grogan interviewed Scott at the Peterson's home, again in an interview that was not recorded. And according to the police report, Scott told police that Lacey did sometimes walk the residential streets in the neighborhood, but she had no particular route when she did so. When Scott was interviewed by police on December 24th, 25th, and 26th, their questions focused on Lacey's general walking routes in the park, because everyone was assuming she had went for the walk in the park. Scott had no way of knowing eyewitnesses in the Loma neighborhood would come forward over the coming days and weeks with reports that they saw her. He had no idea about this. And not that he just saw her, but he saw her walking the dog. Nor was he ever asked by police whether the eyewitnesses who were reporting seeing Lacey walking a golden retriever that morning were putting Lacey at locations in the neighborhood that were consistent with any of her or their general walking routes. Like, they didn't ask, like, hey, or this person says that they saw her here. Is this where she normally walks? Had police asked Scott specifically about the locations where eyewitnesses were reporting seeing Lacey walking, Scott would have told them that they were consistent with the general route they sometimes took when walking the dog in the neighborhood. In late April 2004, as the trial was getting ready to begin, eyewitness Chris Clark called the police after seeing an article in the Modesto Bee reporting that the prosecution was going to present evidence that Lacey was not walking her dog during the 2 months preceding her disappearance. DA investigator Kevin Bertolotto interviewed Clark, who stated that on October 15, 2002, he began working for Lacey's neighbor who lived around the corner on Encena Avenue near Covina, where he had seen Lacey walking in the neighborhood approximately 5 times in the 2 months preceding her disappearance, including in December, about 2 weeks before she disappeared. Clark stated that he generally saw Lacey walking in the morning and she would be walking eastbound. Clark stated that he also seen Lacey walking in the park near the neighborhood by the creek, and that he had seen her walking by herself on 3 occasions. Clark further stated that his boss's son, Richie, had even talked to Lacey as she passed by on 1 occasion. They never even bothered to interview any of those people, the Richie dude. Now, all this about a boat. Scott started talking to friends about buying a boat in early 2002. 2002. Scott began fishing with his father at a young age, about 3. As an adult, Scott had owned 3 boats at various times. One of the first dates he had with Lacey was on a deep sea fishing boat. After moving to Modesto, Scott and Lacey had done some camping and Scott had gone fishing a few times. In late 2001 or early 2002, after moving to Modesto, Scott went fishing at Lake Amador with Ron, Lacey's stepfather. Ron was an avid fisherman and talked about wishing he had a fishing boat. So Ron loves to fish. Ron wished he had more money so he could buy a fishing boat, okay? Did not know this until recently that Lacey's stepfather, Ron Gransky, he himself had also gone fishing on Christmas Eve, December 24th. Say that again? Yeah. Gransky himself had also gone fishing on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2002. So it must not have been that odd, right? The prosecution's theory at trial was that Scott secretly bought a fishing boat without telling Lacey or anyone else as part of the plan to kill his wife and son and dispose of their bodies in the bay because he did not want to be a father. Like legit, that was said. Here's the trial transcript page, all this crap. The prosecution knew, however, that Lacey and Scott bought the boat together as a gift for Ron and that Scott was talking to friends about wanting to buy a boat earlier in 2002 before he learned he was going to be a father. Footer here. New evidence shows that after Lacey was abducted, Sharon Rocha asked Scott about why he had bought the boat, and Scott told her it was a surprise for Ron. The prosecution argued that Scott made the plan to buy the boat after meeting Amber Fry. But he did not meet her for the first time until November 19th, 2002, many months after he began talking to others about wanting to get a boat. Dude, he didn't meet Amber in November 19th, you guys. Amber is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. November 19th, 2002. She put him on Christmas cards, pictures of them. In early 2002, Scott talked to his friend Guy, and just another guy that they're talking about buying a boat this fall. Do you want to go in on buying a boat? In early November of 2002, a few weeks before Thanksgiving, Scott and Lacey had dinner with friends Guy and Jody Migley, and Scott again talked about wanting to buy a boat. Police knew this. It was confirmed in a police report. Police interviewed Jody and Brian. Jody recalled Scott saying something about a boat at dinner several weeks before Thanksgiving. And this Brian guy remembers Scott talking about a boat fishing or a boat over 3 months before Lacey went missing. In early December 2002, Scott and Lacey decided to look for a small fishing boat that they could buy and give to Ron as a surprise at Christmas, with the idea being that Ron and Scott would share the boat and they could use it to take Connor fishing. And he was, as he was growing up, just as Scott had done with his dad. It was a good plan. Ron and Sharon had a place to store it, and the Petersons did not. Plus, because it was being a surprise, Scott and Lacey were not telling others about their plans to buy the boat. So on Saturday, December 7th, 2002, classified ads for boats were searched on the Petersons' home computer. December 7th, 2002, classified ads for boats were searched on the Petersons' home computer, which was used by both Scott and Lacey. There was no evidence that anyone tried to delete any searches or other information from any of the Petersons' computers. The next morning, Sunday, December 8th, and again that evening, and the next day, there were numerous visits to websites focusing on boating in the Bay Area and sturgeon fishing. One of Lacey's relatives had spoken to Scott at a family party about fishing in the Bay. Yada, yada, yada. There were searches for fishing, tackle, San Francisco, and 10 trips for better sturgeon fishing. The state of California Fish and Game website was searched. Also searched were the 2002 Ocean Sport Fishing Regulations webpage and archived fishing reports that included a report from 2000. I mean, that basically there was something from December. All of those searches were conducted from the Peterson's home laptop that was used by both Scott and Lacey. Scott found a few used fishing boats for sale on the internet and ruled out a few, including one that was cheaper than the one that he ended up buying and another one that was just not registered. So he drove by one that was for sale to take a look at and decided against it because it was not registered. That same day, it was Saturday, December 7th, Scott contacted Bruce Peterson, no relation though, who had listed his 14-foot game fisher aluminum fishing boat for sale in the Modesto B. The boat was registered and was listed for $1,500. Scott went to look at the boat the next day. On Sunday, December 8th, the boat had primarily been used in freshwater lakes and was to be sold with 2 rod holders, 2 life jackets, a 15-horsepower outboard trolling motor, 1 oar, a battery, a fuel tank, canvas cover, and the trailer with a couple extra tires. Okay. Bruce wanted to keep the 2 anchors he used with the boat because he was planning to buy another boat. So he asked Scott if he could keep them, and Scott said, yeah, he had no problem with that. Bruce had never used the boat cover when the boat was in transit, and he did not provide Scott with any ropes or bungee cords or anything like that to secure the boat cover. No bungee cords suitable for the securing the boat cover to the boat were found during any of the searches of the warehouse or any other property that the Petersons owned, which was just their house. Bruce routinely hauled the boat on the trailer distances of 60 or 70 miles to go fishing by securing the boat to the trailer using 2 cords. There you go. Look at that. Look at that right there. This is absolutely wild. So it was just, and they circle it. They showed this was an exhibit. Yep, just, you guys know those S-shape bungee black cords. So what is your... When Scott saw Bruce Peterson's boat on Sunday, December 8th, he offered him $1,400 to buy it, and Bruce accepted the offer. Bruce wanted cash for the boat, so Scott returned the next day on Monday, December 9th, after the bank had opened, paid Bruce for the boat, filled out his name and address, and signed the liability release portion of the pink slip and title, which Bruce then mailed to the DMV. Bruce had not had the boat in the water since September of 2002, and Scott did not start the motor before he bought the boat. So it kind of makes sense, right? You got to put the fucker in the water to make sure it works before you're going to give it as a gift. So he just, Bruce had not had the boat in the water since September of 2002, and Scott did not start the motor before he bought the boat. Now, the events of November of 2002, they call it November 19th, 2002. This is Scott met Amber Fry. On November 19th, 2002, Scott was out of town on business and met with a woman named Amber Fry, whom he met through a work colleague. They had sex. Day 1. Do you guys not see what it's all about? Come on now. Who is Ron? Ron is Lacey's stepfather. Now, literally, it just says, whom he met through a work colleague. They had sex, period. They met up a second time on December 2nd, when Scott spent 2 nights in Fresno at Fry's place. The prosecution argued here that after visiting Fry just 2 times on November 20th and again on December 2nd and 3rd, that Scott had already hatched a plan to buy a boat without Lacey's knowledge as part of a plan to kill his pregnant wife and their unborn son so he could use the boat to dump their body in the bay. Again, wild. Now, Scott saw Fry again on December 9th and December 11th. Scott saw Fry for the fifth and final time on December 14th, 2002. He told Fry he would be in Maine for Christmas and then in Europe for New Year's. He never saw Fry again after December 14th. Brochini testified that when he questioned Scott on December 24th, he asked if there were any problems in their marriage and admitted he never expressly asked Scott whether he had a girlfriend. The next day, Mansfield similarly asked Scott if there were any problems with others. And Scott told him there were no problems with others, no problems with his wife, and that he had never had a fight in his life, according to Mansfield's notes. Mansfield did not specifically ask Scott about any affairs. November 23rd through the 30th was Thanksgiving with the Peterson family in San Diego and the baby shower for Lacey and Connor. Events of December 2002. So December 17th through 19th, remember, just a week before Lacey's disappearance, Lacey and Scott spent a weekend in Carmel, California, with Scott's parents, Lee and Jackie. Lee and Jackie both recall that Lacey walked for several hours. So then we get to December 20th, 2002. Lacey walked the dog in the park and went to the warehouse to see the boat. Scott went to Big Five to buy fishing gear and a fishing license. On Friday, so this is a big part of contention as well. Like, oh my God, remember that 2-day fishing license that you got, you son of a bitch. Why was it wrote down the December 23rd for the December 23rd and December 24th if you didn't go to the 24th? What the fuck, Scott? Well, let's find out about that. On Friday, December 20th, 2002, the day after Scott and Lacey returned from their trip to see Scott's parents, Lacey walked the dog in the park. Lacey's usual route when walking the dog in the park was to walk down to the main park entrance, around the children's play area, the barbecue, the tennis courts, past the bridge, back to the bathrooms, and back to Covina Avenue. That same day, Lacey went to meet Scott at his warehouse, where the fishing boat was being temporarily stored. Tenant Peggy O'Donnell, who also leased space at the same complex where Scott's warehouse was located, told MPD on December 30th when she was interviewed that she had seen Lacey at Scott's warehouse on, I can't remember if it was December 20th or December 23rd, and recalled that Lacey came over and asked if she could use O'Donnell's restroom because Scott's warehouse was full of inventory, making it hard to reach the restroom that was located in the back of the warehouse. Now, footer. On December 30th, 2002, MPD Detective Holmes interviewed Peggy O'Donnell and learned that Lacey visited the warehouse on December 20th or possibly December 23rd, where the boat was being temporarily stored, and that Lacey never came over and used O'Donnell's restroom while there. No, I'm sorry, and came over and used the restroom while there. None of the MPD investigators assigned to this case followed up Detective Holmes' report about Lacey being at the warehouse after the boat purchase until after Scott was arrested and charged with capital murder. At the time of trial, Miss O'Donnell was unavailable to testify for health reasons. Are you fucking kidding me? Oh my God, what a blow. What? Could we get that bitch on like a, can't we depose her? Like, I was like, wait, what? Yeah. At the time of trial, Miss O'Donnell was unavailable to testify for health reasons. Or was she dying? Like, what? Wait, what? On August 13th, 2003, Detective Brochini interviewed witness Greg Smith over the phone and learned from Smith that Lacey used Peggy O'Donnell's bathroom on 12/23, which was reflected in Brochini's notes from the call. This was on August 13th, 2003, so he was arrested in April, okay, of 2003. Here, we have these notes that he wrote up, okay. There she is. So they had this other guy, okay. Now, when Brochini prepared his written report of the interview with Smith, he intentionally ixnayed. the information about Lacey using O'Donnell's restroom on December 23rd. So the report the prosecution provided to the defense did not reflect that information. These are the portion of Bruccini's interview with Greg Smith that is on his taped account was not transcribed at trial, but it is transcribed here as follows. Quote unquote, once they were outside, Smith pointed out a neighboring building, a neighboring warehouse, and advised Dalton and Pavlik that Peggy had allowed Lacey to use the restroom on 12/23/02. Smith said that Dalton and Pavlik drove out of the warehouse parking lot without contacting Peggy. Smith said that he had spoken to Peggy several times regarding Lacey using Peggy's restroom on 12/23, and Peggy told Smith that he had already been interviewed by law enforcement. The defense had earlier objected to Detective Bruccini's destroying his notes and audio tapes, and the court ordered that he stop destroying his notes and tapes so that they could be provided to the defense. Had the court not directed Bruccini to stop destroying his notes and tapes, the defense would not have learned that Bruccini intentionally suppressed exculpatory evidence related to Lacey's knowledge of the boat purchased to prevent the defense from learning about it. Oh my God. Oh my God. Fucking bastards. When Lacey was at the warehouse, she reminded Scott about the time he had bought another boat without first testing the motor, and he soon learned the motor was not working properly and had to get rid of the boat. Scott decided he needed to get the boat into the water to test out the motor before giving it over to Ron. After Lacey left the warehouse, Scott went to Big Five to buy a fishing license and some fishing gear so he could take the boat out in the water, test out the motor, and do some fishing before giving the boat to Ron. I mean, a lot of the reason I went was just to get the boat in the water to see, Scott said he primarily went there to try the boat out. The prosecution elicited a great deal of testimony about the fact that Scott purchased a 2-day fishing license for 2003 and that he filled out the dates he would use the license himself, December 23rd, December 24th, instead of the store clerk filling out those dates. The evidence showed, however, that because it was the end of the year, why would I be buying a license if it's going to be about to be January? Buy one for that year. They only had, so it was at the end of the year, Big Five had run out of 1-day fishing license for 2002. They only had 2-day fishing license for 2003 available. So that is what he bought. So actually, this is proven to be absolutely factual. Like, the Big Five employees are trained on how to fill out fishing licenses with the date that the licenses were issued. However, guess what happened when Scott was there? The date or dates it would be used as the same date it was bought, but a temporary seasonal employee was working when Scott checked out, and the date the license was issued was left blank. Scott also bought some new lures at Big Five, which were suitable for fishing for sturgeon in the bay. Scott also went to UPS to pick up the mortiser he had ordered to build the table legs for the table he was building that Lacey wanted to use by the pool. Mid-trial, this is some footers for you. Another boom. Mid-trial in August of 2004. So he was arrested in 2003 in April. Okay. Then now a year goes by. So then trial starts. So August, this is mid-trial, August 2004. The prosecution admitted to the court that someone reported to Detective Grogan that someone else told him Lacey went to the warehouse and that, quote unquote, he didn't want to discover that information immediately to the defense. So he removed that bit of information he wanted to review before he turned it over to the defense. In other words, after Detective Bruccini was caught suppressing exculpatory evidence while he was testifying on cross-examination, Detective Grogan, who was banging the DA, suddenly remembered that he too had removed information he did not want to turn over to the defense related to somebody similar to Peggy O'Donnell placing Lacey in the shop. Unbelievable. Detective Grogan did not follow up on O'Donnell's report until about 8 months after Scott's arrest and after his preliminary hearing, when he finally interviewed O'Donnell assistant Rosemary on December 23rd of 2003. She corroborated the statements by Scott and O'Donnell that Lacey was at the warehouse, and O'Donnell's statement that Lacey had used their restroom. Jesus. Detective Grogan ultimately conceded that Lacey knew about or possibly knew about the boat based on Scott's statements to him on December 30th, that Lacey knew of the boat purchase and had been in the warehouse on December 20th. And Rosemary, her statement that Lacey had used O'Donnell's restroom. I mean, this is ridiculous. Despite Detective Grogan's admission that Lacey knew about the boat purchase and was at the warehouse on December 20th, just 11 days after the boat was purchased, the prosecution nevertheless argued in closing, in quotes, "What else do we know about the boat? Nobody knew about it. No one. All the friends, family, the Peterson family, Roaches, no one knew the defendant had bought a boat. So you've got this secret purchase going on," end quote. That argument was not supported by the evidence. So fucking dirty, man. These sick fucks. Okay, back here. So Scott also bought, like I told you, went to the Big Lure and he went to UPS. Okay, great. Now, going on to December 19th or 20th, Scott made an anchor for the new fishing boat. After buying the boat, Lacey, not Scott, Lacey called some marine supply stores, including Bob's Marine and CC Marine Supply, and learned that a new anchor would cost around $60. Check this out. These are small, but these are 2 handwritten notes about this. Okay. So this is Lacey's handwriting. Big, bubbly, like CC Marine. Like, I can make it probably. The prosecution had this. Okay. They had this. Prosecution had this. So after buying the boat, Lacey called some, like I said, okay, now, these notes are in her handwriting, were found on 2 pieces of paper, which the police found in the Peterson's home when they executed the first search warrant on December 26th through December 27th. On January 2nd, 2003, so just a couple of days later, Detective Owen called Bob's Marine and learned that a boat anchor weighing 20 pounds would come in right around $58. Lee Peterson testified that when he took Scott fishing as a little boy, he sometimes rented fishing boats at Lake Poway and that they had concrete anchors shown below. On December 19th or 20th, Scott used a 2-quart paint bucket to make a single concrete anchor for the fishing boat, which was similar to those he had made when he went fishing with his father. This is part of one of the exhibits here. The boat. Idiots. Police found no other concrete anchors at Scott's warehouse, nor in the bay, nor in any of the other locations they searched. Now, December 21st through December 22nd, it was an uneventful weekend. The weekend of December 21st and 22nd was uneventful. On Sunday, December 22nd, Lacey walked the dog in the neighborhood. Lacey began preparing for Christmas brunch by setting the table. Lacey cooked dinner both nights, so they're having people over for brunch and stuff, but she's just getting ready for Christmas. Okay. The prosecution nevertheless argued at trial that Scott had made at least 4 or 5, concrete weights, by the way. Dude, they had divers in that bay searching, did not locate anything of the sort. Nothing. Now, on Sunday, they watched football, and then Scott went to Home Depot to get shelving for the nursery, which he installed. The shelves were photographed on the nursery wall by CSO Veronica Holmes on December 22nd or December 27th when they were in there. So here's him doing the shelving. He went to Home Depot. They took the pictures of it. Scott and Lacey also worked in the front yard, mowing that afternoon, and then moved to the backyard where they were mowing and transplanting plants from one side of the yard to the other side, according to their neighbor Karen Severs, who found them there when she walked over and asked Scott if he could come over and help straighten out her Christmas tree, which he agreed to do. Lacey confirmed Christmas Day brunch plans with her brother Brent. Now, on December 23rd, here we get to the day. Welcome all. Welcome all. December 23rd. Housekeeper, Margarita. God, what a name. Cheers, girl. Margarita. Jump a little line up. She arrived at around 8:30 in the morning. And this is on December 23rd. A short time later, Lacey left to buy groceries at Trader Joe's. From there, Lacey went to Phillips Electric to buy a lamp part. Lacey returned home with the groceries and made a call to her friend Heather. Lacey made herself lunch and went and watched some television. She left home again and went to get her eyebrows waxed, and then returned home to meet Scott for a doctor's appointment. Remember, this is on the 23rd. Scott went to work at his warehouse that morning, and after doing some work, he thought about taking the boat out to test the motor, so he filled in the dates of December 23rd and 24th on the 2-day fishing license he had purchased at Big Five. He then realized he and Lacey had a doctor's appointment that afternoon at 2:45, so he had to scrap those plans to take the boat out since he always attended the appointments and wanted to attend that one as well. The prosecution argued in closing that the fishing license, this is a footer, was evidence of Scott's guilt, goddammit. He bought this 2-day license. He told Detective Rochini that it was a morning decision to go fishing. If that's true, why is this license filled out of December 23rd and December 24th? Why would you fill out a license on the 24th for the day before? There was nothing suspicious or nefarious about why the license was filled out on December 23rd and December 24th as set forth above, which makes perfect sense. We do this all the time. Like, oh, fuck, I can't go. I might have to go tomorrow. He returned home and Lacey, and they went to the OBGYN appointment. Scott then went to work out at the gym. While he was there, Lacey called to let him know that his sister Amy had an opening and could cut his hair at the salon where she worked. It was called Salon. What a name. At around 5:45 p.m., Lacey and Scott met Amy at the salon so she could cut Scott's hair and show Lacey how to use a curling iron properly because she got this new style haircut. Lacey brought her curling iron from home with her to the salon. Lacey has just been using the curling iron like she was doing it the wrong way, so I just helped her flip it out the right way to get a kink out of it. That's how her sister testified at trial. The outfit Lacey wore to the salon on December 23rd became an issue at trial because the prosecution told the jury in the opening that Lacey was wearing the same pants she had on at the salon when her remains were recovered, supporting the theory that Lacey was killed the night of the 23rd. In quotes, you're going to hear that her body was recovered on April 14th wearing khaki-colored pants. Amy Rocha said that when Lacey was last seen on December 23rd, she was wearing a black jacket, that cream-colored scarf, and those khaki pants. When the police executed a search warrant at the Petersons, home on February 18, 2003, however, Amy searched Lacey's closet and located and identified the outfit Lacey wore at the salon. Amy found, quote-unquote, the whole outfit Lacey had worn on December 23rd when she searched Lacey's closet with the police, including pants Lacey wore to the salon. In other words, contrary to what the prosecution told the jury, Amy found the fucking pants Lacey had worn. They were hanging in her closet in February of 2003. They were not the pants Lacey was wearing when her remains were recovered. Detective Grogan interviewed Amy again in July after the arrest of Scott. So July 2003, after Lacey's remains were recovered. And he asked her to select the pants Lacey was wearing on December 23rd from a pants lineup that included, unbeknownst to Amy, a catalog photo of the pants found on Lacey's body was depicted in photo number 3. The pants Amy had previously identified as the pants Lacey had worn to the salon on December 23rd were not included in the lineup. Again, let me just clarify this for people. They do a pants lineup with catalog pants, okay? No, I shit you not. Look at this. I'll find it here in a second. All right. And so they say, listen up, buttercups. You're going to pick from these 3 or 4 pairs. Which one was she wearing at the salon? No shit. So the pants that were actually on Lacey was number 3, but she had no idea. Okay. Amy says, well, I can tell you that pants number 3, those were definitely not what she had on when she came. That's all she says. Is she says, Amy told Grogan that the pants in photo 3, the pants found on Lacey's were, that was she was wearing. Well, they were definitely not those pants. She had no idea. like this is just wow, Hey, no idea. But the prosecution nevertheless falsely argued to the jury in closing that Lacey was wearing those pants I showed you when her remains were found, referring to the pants Lacey wore when she went to the salon on December 23rd. Here's a footer for you. That false argument contradicted the evidence and was very damning. It was very damning. If the jury believed Lacey was wearing the same pants at the salon on December 23rd, do you guys understand what that would mean? That Scott was virtually the only person who could have killed her? In view of the other evidence presented at trial, it wouldn't matter. If those are the pants that she's wearing, unless someone wants to argue and say, like, you can't mix up like khaki and black. I mean, come on. It's all fucking lies. The prosecution literally was throwing spaghetti at the wall, and the jury, I don't know how they were not like, he just said this, and now they're saying, okay, well, if that can't work, then it has to be this, and if that, okay, then like just changing up their story every fucking day. The prosecution continues to falsely represent to this court, as it did in 2024, and quotes that when Lacey's body washed ashore, she was still wearing the motherhood maternity tan capri pants she wore on December 23rd and her maternity bra, but no shirt. Dude, this was written in 2024. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. In referring to Amy's February 18, 2003 search of Lacey's clothing, where Amy found the whole outfit, the prosecution claimed without citation that after going through all of Lacey's clothing, they could not locate the cream-colored maternity capri pants. Those are blatant misrepresentations of the evidence the prosecution made to the jury in 2004 and continued to make to Judge Hill in 2024. 20 years later. Fucking cocksuckers, man. I'm so sick of these fucking hoes. There's some hoes in this house. There's some hoes in this house. Now, Amy testified that Lacey and Scott interacted with each other like usual. Everything was great. Okay. When they were at the salon, Lacey made a phone call to order pizza so she could pick it up on her way home. Scott invited Amy to join them for dinner, but Amy declined because she was meeting friends who were visiting from out of state. So Scott and Lacey went home, ate pizza, and watched a movie. At 8:30 that night, Lacey spoke briefly with her mother about plans for Christmas Eve dinner the following night. As noted above, the same night at around 10 p.m., a man was just around the corner from the Petersons, remember, knocking on the door. Now, December 24th. Hey, Nancy, listen up. There's some hoes in this house. There's some hoes. There's some hoes in this house. December 24th, 2002, Lacey is missing. The morning of December 24th, 2002 was a regular morning. Lacey got up around 7 a.m. and Scott woke up about an hour later. Normal for them. The Petersons' home computer was located in the Petersons' spare bedroom and was used by both Scott and Lacey. The evidence showed that someone was logged onto the internet between 8:40 and 8:45 a.m., accessing a Yahoo shopping website and looking at garden, weather vane, a Gap Pro fleece scarf, and a sunflower umbrella stand. Okay. Now, these jurors must want to go home so bad, because what guy is going to get up and at 8:45 be looking up sunflower umbrellas? Gap shit. Come on, man. But this was a way to say, like, hey, Lacey was not killed on December 23rd. Okay, she wasn't killed that night. They wake up, everybody's alive. Here, they both share this computer. Well, look at what was being Googled. All right. There is no evidence Scott had shopped online for those or similar items in the past. Nor did investigators make any effort to determine whether it was Scott or Lacey who logged on at 8:40 that morning. Nor did they search Lacey's purchase history at the Gap website to see if she had made any purchases on that website in the past, which a prosecution witness testified could have been done. You understand? You understand that their own prosecution witness is testifying saying, yeah, we could have figured that out. That information would have been available. But you guys didn't do that, right? It is reasonable to infer from the evidence that Lacey was alive that morning and shopping online for a sunflower umbrella stand, a Gap fleece scarf, and a garden weather vane. Indeed, as several prosecution witnesses testified, that Lacey had a sunflower tattoo on her left ankle. Drawing such an inference from the online shopping done that morning is far less strained than most of the inferences the prosecution has asked the jury to make in this circumstantial case. Moreover, the new evidence presented in Claim 1 shows that Lacey was alive on December 24th and therefore able to use the computer and do all of the things Scott told police she did at home that morning. Now, after Scott woke up, he said he ate a bowl of cereal, and he and Lacey watched part of the Today Show and Martha motherfucking Stewart. Lacey was planning on marinating the French toast. She was planning on serving for Christmas brunch next day. Scott recalled that Martha Stewart episode, they were watching, talked about something involving, meringue or something like that. Here's a footer. When Detective Brochini interviewed Scott later that night at the police station, on 11/24, Scott told him the episode they watched together was about, meringue or something like that. Brochini filled out a report stating that there was no mention of meringue on the show that aired that day, accusing Scott of lying to the police about his activities on December 24th. In the prosecution's opening statement, the prosecution specifically told the jury that, quote unquote, on the 24th, Martha Stewart didn't have a segment with meringue. What? How is Mark Garagos not saying objection every time that they're speaking? Okay. Now, in fact, Scott was telling the truth. Miss Stewart did mention meringues on the show that morning, which Brochini was forced to admit on cross-examination. Lemon meringue pie. Just meringues. He was just saying, like, Scott's over here saying, I don't know, something about meringue pie, meringues. Detective was wrong, and he had to admit it, Detective Brochini wrongly accused Scott of lying about a number of other things in his report, discussed infra, which infected the entire police investigation from the beginning. Brochini's false information was passed on to other detectives, creating unwarranted suspicion and Scott's honesty about what he did on December 24, 2002. Brochini's false information was even used to obtain a wiretap on Scott's phone. Okay, so now, on or about December 28th, 2002, Sharon asked Scott to tell her exactly what Lacey was doing the morning of the 24th when he left the house, and he told her. He said, in quotes, she looked so beautiful and cute because she was sitting on her bench in front of her mirror, styling her hair the way that Amy had just shown her, end quote. At the time that Scott told Sharon that Lacey was sitting on the bench in front of the mirror, styling her hair, he had no way of knowing that when the police searched and photographed the inside of the Petersons' home on December 24th, that they took a photo of the bench positioned in front of the mirror in the bathroom. Oh my God. Look at this. Everybody knows when you just go and grab something that's not supposed to be there. Oh, yep. What's that doing there? Oh, just sitting there. Just, she was just curling her hair. Just like working on the way that her sister told her. He had no way of knowing that, right? He had no idea the precise scenario Scott described to, his mother-in-law when he told her that the way that she was curling her hair. The photo of the bathroom the police took on December 24th, 2002 is shown below. So he tells her that on the 28th. Okay. But the picture was taken on the 24th. So he had no idea that they even took that picture because he wasn't in the fucking house. Because they made him stay the fuck out. Scott and Lacey talked about how they planned to spend their day. Lacey told Scott she was going to walk their dog down to the park and then go to the store to get what she needed to make the gingerbread to take to their dinner that night at Lacey's parents' house. Sharon confirmed that Scott told her later that evening after Lacey was reported missing that Lacey had planned to go to the store, bake gingerbread, and walk the dog. Lacey wanted to mop the kitchen floor that morning. They were hosting a Christmas brunch that next day. Scott put the two cats and the dog outside so Lacey could mop, and he filled up the mop bucket for her so she would not have to lift the heavy bucket out of the sink. When Scott returned home that afternoon, the mop and bucket were still in the kitchen, so he emptied the mop bucket and set it on the mop outside on the stoop. Scott was initially going to walk the dog with Lacey that morning, so he grabbed his tennis shoes out of the blue Nike duffel bag that was in the spare bedroom, which he uses as a gym bag. When he saw it was getting late, and after talking it over with Lacey, he decided he would instead go put the boat in the water, test out the motor, and do some fishing, and he set his shoes on the wet bar outside the patio. And I bet you anything, she was on board with that because she was probably going to grab some last-minute items, I'm telling you, for shopping to get him something for Christmas. That she'd be like, yeah, go and do that because I'm going to go do blah, 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 blah. Dude, everybody does it at Christmas time. Like, you need to get out of my hair for a minute. God, I just wish that he would have went walking with her first, though. Oh, my God. That's so sad. Can you imagine every single day just saying to yourself, God, if I just would have fucking went walking with her, I just would have just, hey, Ron, you can figure out the boat, man. It'll be fine. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Oh, God. So sad. Okay, so here we go. When he saw that it was getting late and after talking it over with Lacey, he decided he would instead go put the boat in the water, test out the motor, and do some fishing, right? Great. So Scott wanted to try the boat, in quotes. He wanted to make sure there was nothing wrong with it because when he bought the boat, he only was able to start it once dry. And I know what that's like. And he had not yet had a chance to put the boat in the water yet. There is nothing in the record showing that the investigators asked Scott if he and Lacey discussed his decision to go fishing in the bay that day, but most of the police interviews with Scott were not recorded and were poorly documented, with numerous errors and omissions. The evidence suggests that they did discuss his decision to put the boat in the water because, among other reasons, he and Lacey talked about their plans for that day. He made the decision before he left home, and when Scott called Lacey later that day, as he was leaving the marina to tell her he was running late, he left her a voicemail. You guys remember the voicemail? And hello, like if I would have heard this as a juror, it'd have been like, yeah, this is called Lana logic right here, which is he says on the voicemail, right? Scott called Lacey later and he says, "Hey, beautiful, I just left you a message at home, 2:15. I'm leaving Berkeley. I'm leaving Berkeley." If he's hiding where he's, having this boat and everything, oh, Lana, that just means like he was just so good to do that too. I'll give you the part about calling, but to say I'm leaving Berkeley, no. I'm leaving Berkeley. Also, ready? Hello. This means that he also was never saying and ever telling anybody that I was going golfing or that I went golfing. If you're leaving a message on something that would be eventually heard by the police, oh, why did you say about you're leaving Berkeley? Come on, man, what the fuck? So stupid. Especially wait till you see how this whole golfing thing even came about. If Scott Peterson would have just been the one to call 911, I just need Lacey's mom to come forward and tell the truth. You know Scott did not tell you that he went golfing. Why is your man saying that on the 911 call? So weird. Ready? So he says, hey, I won't be able to get to Vela Farm, right? Remember? Well, suggesting that Lacey would understand why he was saying that he was leaving Berkeley, like, duh. When Scott told Lacey he was going to his warehouse, she asked him to take the patio umbrellas from their backyard to store at the warehouse for the winter. So he loaded the umbrellas into the back of his truck. Kristen Dempwolf told the police she saw Scott putting things into the bed of his truck between 9:20 and 9:40, with the truck facing the house and the tail end was near the street. This is so important. People want to talk about that this has anything to do with like the Chris Watts case, man. Fuck Chris Watts. No. Again, 9:20 to 9:40, he was putting the umbrellas in the back of the truck, which like the end was not being hidden up by the house. It was still sticking out normal way. Kristen did not testify at trial because the police hypnotized her using personnel not qualified to using personnel not qualified to conduct those types of interviews, rendering her testimony inadmissible. Are you fucking kidding me? They hypnotized two people. And I know they did it on purpose. I don't care what anybody says. Why? I cannot believe this. Kristen Dempwolf's report was the only evidence the defense had showing that Scott's truck was parked with the truck bed facing the street, which contradicted the prosecution's theory that Scott backed his truck up to the fence and put his wife's dead body into the bed of the truck without being seen. Without Dempwolf's testimony, the prosecution was free to argue, and did argue, that Scott backed up his truck to the gate, carried Lacey out. He put her in the back, he loaded it, and drove off. That argument was unsupported by any evidence. Extensive forensic examination of the truck itself and evidence collected from the truck showed that there was no evidence Lacey's dead body was ever in the truck. Why wouldn't you put the goddamn dogs up in that bitch? Let the dog get up in there, sniff. Nope, don't do that. No blood was detected on the steering wheel swab and 6 other swabs associated with the pickup truck. No blood was detected on the simple green container. Detective Hendy told scent dog handler Eloise Anderson not to put her heavier dog, into the truck to search for evidence of Lacey being present there. Why? Unbelievable. Scott left the house that morning after deciding to go fishing. He thought it was about 9:30, which was an approximate time of departure. Lacey was finishing up the mopping when he left. When he was leaving, Lacey said she was going to finish cleaning up. She was mopping the kitchen floor, take the dog for a walk, and she was going to the store to buy for Christmas morning breakfast the next day. And that was going to be an involved prep. So she was prepping the breakfast and she was going to make gingerbread cookies for that dinner's night. When Scott last saw Lacey, she was wearing black maternity pants, a white t-shirt, and was either wearing white tennis shoes, which she wore when she was walking the dog, or she was barefoot. He could not remember. Lacey was also wearing a ring, a watch, and a necklace. Scott left home before 10 a.m. The exact time that Scott left home the morning of December 24th was a contentious issue at trial. To convict Scott Peterson, the prosecution needed to show that Lacey was killed before he left home. Any evidence showing that she was still alive after he left for the day would exonerate him under the prosecution's theory of the case. Showing that Lacey was killed before 10 a.m. also helped the prosecution explain and justify law enforcement's wholesale and admitted failure to investigate the many eyewitness reports that Lacey was seen walking the dog in the neighborhood and park that morning after Scott left. Finally, since the evidence showed that the Medinas left town that morning by about 10:33 a.m., showing that Lacey was already dead by that time, put to rest any argument by the defense that Lacey saw the Medina burglary in progress and her disappearance related to the burglary. Scott turned his warehouse computer on at about 10 a.m. Kristen Dempler told the police that she saw Scott putting things into his bed of his truck between 9:20 and 9:40 a.m., which was facing the house and the taillight end near the street as she walked. Scott estimated that he left home around 9:30 and that Lacey was finishing up mopping the kitchen floor and planning to take the dog for a walk after he left. The Martha Stewart show Scott told Broschini he saw that morning mentioned the lemon meringues at 9:48 a.m. 9:48 a.m. 9:48 a.m. Scott's warehouse at 1027 North Emerald Avenue was located about 3 miles from the Petersons' home. It took Scott about 10 minutes to get there. A police report filed by Detective Grogan states that Scott's work computer was turned on at about 10 a.m. Oh, for fuck's sake. The evidence in this police report by lead investigator Detective Grogan shows that Scott had left home just after hearing Martha Stewart referring to lemon meringues or whatever at 9:48 a.m. and arrived at his warehouse about 10 a.m., at which time he turned on his computer. Prosecution argued that Scott intentionally lied to the police about his departure time when he told them that he left around 9:30. What? Oh my God. Here's some footnotes for you. A computer forensic analysis is the only way Grogan could have determined Scott turned his computer on at approximately 10 a.m., but the defense was not provided with any computer forensics report establishing what time Scott's work computer was turned on. Detective Wall testified, quote unquote, that computer activity started at approximately 10:30 a.m. and ended at 10:56 a.m., noting that during this time frame, websites were accessed and files were being created, but he did not testify as to what time the computer was turned on. The prosecution has never provided the defense with any computer forensic reports explaining how Detective Grogan was able to conclude that Scott turned his computer on at approximately 10 a.m. on 12/24/2002. In October of 2024, Judge Hill denied petitioner's request for production of petitioner's hard drive from his office computer. Who the fuck? Hill, are you insane? Are you damn insane? Are you off your rocker? Why? You're not taking that. You're not taking that. You're not taking that. You're not getting that. Here's another footer. The prosecution accused Scott of lying about what time he left home that morning, but at the time he told police he thought he left home around 9:30 on the evening of December 24th. He had no way of knowing his neighbor would later report seeing their dog at 10:18 a.m. or that the Medinas left their home at 10:33 a.m. to go out of town for the holidays, or that the precise time he left home that morning would become critical to his defense in a capital murder trial. He also had no way of knowing what time eyewitnesses would later report seeing Lacey walking in the neighborhood. If he were going to lie about what time he left home that morning, he would not have volunteered to the police that he watched the Martha Stewart show with Lacey that morning, or that he saw a segment about meringues before leaving home. They knew it all. They knew that he was on the money with all this shit. In an effort to show Scott was lying about what time he left home, the prosecution called DA Stephen Jacobson, who testified that based on Scott's cell phone records, he used his cell phone to check his voicemail at 10:08 a.m. while he was still at home. Test confirming cellular telephone call by Scott Peterson on December 24, 2002 at 10:08 a.m., noting start at the Peterson home. These records showed that on December 24, 2002 at 10 a.m., Scott made a 1 minute and 21 second call to check his voicemails, which started at the 1250 Brighton cell tower and ended at the 10th and D cell tower. Jacobson made test calls and testified that the cell phone record showed that if he started a call in the Peterson's driveway and drove towards Scott's warehouse, the call would register on the same cell towers that Scott's call had registered on when he called to check his voicemail on December 24th at 10:08 a.m. The prosecution's theory was therefore that Scott began driving from his home to his warehouse at 10:08 a.m. when he called to check his voicemails. However, the prosecution's own witness, Mary Anderson from AT&T, Scott's wireless carrier, put that theory to rest when she testified that because of anomalies in the system related to checking voicemails as opposed to making calls, it is not possible to determine with any certainty where someone is located when they are checking their voicemails for their cell phone. And that was a big thing in the Anand Syed case. Sit down, bitches. The prosecution was unable to refute that evidence. Now, Service Karen found Mackenzie out in the street wearing his leash after Scott left home. Now, the prosecution's entire theory of the case relied heavily on the purported timeline they created based on a report by the Petersons' neighbor, Karen. Karen Service lived next door to the Petersons, and she initially told Scott and the police that she saw the Petersons' dog Mackenzie out in the street wearing his leash at 10:30 a.m. The morning, Karen put Mackenzie into the Petersons' backyard and shut the gate. When Karen put Mackenzie back into the yard, she noticed the leash was moist and covered in leaves and grass clippings. Again, very, very important here. The leash, grass clippings, moist panties. Okay. She thought Lacey was outside and had gone back inside to use the restroom or the phone. Okay. So it was not unusual. So important here. It was not unusual for Mackenzie to escape from the Petersons' backyard and walk around loose in the front yard or the neighborhood. Karen had found Mackenzie out loose in the neighborhood on prior occasions. U.S. mail carrier Russ Graybill also recalled seeing Mackenzie loose in the front of the house when he came to deliver mail at times. In other words, the fact alone that Mackenzie was walking around loose in the front of the Petersons' house was certainly not evidence that Lacey was dead, as the prosecution argued, nor was there anything particularly suspicious about it. Okay, meaning this. Just because the dog's out there, oh, dog got out here, let me put the dog back in, close the gate, because Lacey's either in the house or like that she was out back, but then she went inside to grab something, and then that's why. And so she didn't bother looking around to see if she was there or not. She just put the dog back, closed the gate, and that was it. There was no confirming if Lacey was home or not, which is so important. So important. Now, when Scott learned that Karen had seen Mackenzie loose in the street wearing his leash, it was Scott, not the police, who immediately asked Karen on December 28th, 2002, if she could retrace her steps that morning to see if she could be more precise or certain about the exact time that she saw Mackenzie. After looking at a timestamped sales receipt from a purchase she made that morning, her cell phone records, and retracing her steps, Karen determined it was closer to 10:18 a.m. when she found the dog. According, which is really important, according to Karen, after she found the dog, she went to Austin's Patio Furniture, Starbucks, and then made a call to Tom Egan. Her 10:18 a.m. time estimate relied on 1, a receipt from Austin's Patio Furniture timestamped at 10:34 a.m., and 2, the cell phone record showing a call to Egan at 10:37 a.m. The prosecution argued that Karen's discovery of the dog in front of the yard was conclusive evidence that Lacey was already dead by 10:18 a.m. From there, the prosecution argued that if Scott was telling the truth about Lacey being alive when he left home, which the prosecution maintained was at 10:08 a.m., Lacey would have had to have been abducted in the 10-minute window between 10:08 a.m. and 10:18 a.m., arguing it is not reasonable to believe that Lacey gets abducted, the dog comes home, and has to be found by Karen all in 10 minutes, all in a 10-minute window. Now, here's some footers for you, though. The defense investigator, Jensen, went to Austin's to confirm the accuracy of the register that printed her Karen's timestamp receipt. However, the register had to be retrieved from storage. Once plugged in, 2 receipts were printed, and their timestamps showed 49 minutes apart. However, Austin could not recall how much time elapsed between the 2 receipts being printed. Next footer. There was absolutely no evidence supporting the prosecution's theory that Lacey was dead by the time Karen found the dog. Instead, there was substantial evidence that Lacey was actually still alive and walking in the neighborhood and park after Scott left home. Evidence the police admitted they ignored entirely, and evidence the jury did not hear. And after Karen put the dog into the backyard and shut the gate, whatever time that may have been, see sworn declarations submitted by Frank Aguirre, Diane Campos, Tony Friss, Tom Harshman, Homer Maldonado, all stating that they believe they saw Lacey Peterson walking the dog on December 24th. Several other witnesses also called MPD and reported seeing a dog fitting Mackenzie's description, running around in the neighborhood, wearing a leash with no one tending to the dog. MPD did not interview a single one of those witnesses. Remind yourselves of that. The prosecution told the jury in closing that Mackenzie was found out front in the street because Scott put Lacey Peterson in the back of the car. He snapped the leash off the dog and he left the gate open and he drove away. And you know, like most dogs, I have a dog, and probably a lot of you guys have dogs. You put a leash on a dog, he's going to say, "Hey, we're free to go for a walk," right? He followed the truck out into the street as Scott Peterson drove on down the road. There was no evidence supporting any aspect of that theory. The prosecution also relied on Karen's timeline. It claimed put Lacey's time of death at sometime before 10:18 a.m. to dismiss the eyewitness account that Lacey was seen walking the dog that morning, and to shut down the defense's theory that the Medina burglary may have been related to Lacey's disappearance because the evidence showed the Medinas left town at around 10:30 a.m. that morning. The prosecution argued, for example, that the van Diane Jackson saw parked in front of the Medina's home at 11:40 a.m. that morning was not a credible lead in this case because they knew the dog had already been found at 10:18 a.m. You are going to hear a number of tips like that, a number of sightings. In other words, the prosecution argued that Karen finding the dog was conclusive evidence that Lacey was already dead. However, footer here, new evidence discovered during the post-conviction investigation and set forth herein dismantles the prosecution's strain theory and shows that the prosecution's theory that Lacey was dead by the time Karen found Mackenzie was simply wrong. In addition, U.S. mail carrier Graybill stated in a post-conviction declaration that the Peterson's back gate was open that morning when he delivered the mail between 10:35 and 10:50 a.m. You have to remember, ready? Ready? If he's delivering the mail between 10:35 and 10:50 and the back gate is open. Karen said that she put the dog in and shut the gate. That can't be right then, right? Oh, wait. Yeah, Kalana. That means that Lacey left after, right? Yeah. Lacey left when Karen found the dog, okay? You know how it had a moist leash and the grass clippings? Well, the grass clippings would be from them. They mowed the lawn on Sunday. You remember the day before I was telling you guys they mowed the lawn? And so you have your grass clippings. And so the Scott must have just not have closed that gate all the way. And when the dog went out, Karen just put the dog back in. Lacey was still doing whatever. And then when Lacey left with the dog, she left actually the gate open. So again, in addition, U.S. mail carrier Graybill stated in a post-conviction declaration that the Peterson's back gate was open that morning when he delivered the mail between 10:35 and 10:50 a.m., explaining that Mackenzie was not in the Peterson's backyard or anywhere else on the property because Mackenzie would always bark at him if he was home, whether he was in the front yard, backyard, or even inside the house. Graybill's post-conviction statements support the defense's theory that Lacey took the dog for a walk that morning, sometime before Graybill arrived to deliver the mail, and after Karen put the goddamn dog in the backyard and shut the fucking gate. Whatever time that may have been. And that makes so much more fucking sense, right? Yes, it does. Now, computer records show that Scott was on the internet between 10:30 and 10:56 a.m. looking up how to assemble this shit. Also, this is exactly how his desk was photographed. Yes, Shannon Dean's like, can we talk about that crazy bitch that broke into his house? Girl, we're going to get to all this crazy stuff. But this is what's crazy. What's crazy is it is a mix of a lot of things, but I think this is going to go down as a case. It's just going to be like, holy shit. Everything that could have possibly went wrong for Scott Peterson went wrong. You have corrupt people. You have corrupt police. You have corrupt DAs. Then you have them corrupting in a way like the witnesses. Then you have the media who is just as fucking corrupt, who literally sucks off the government instead of bringing things to light. It's all about money. So it's awful. But everything literally that could have possibly went wrong for him. But when you actually like hear the story, when I said that it went wrong, it wasn't just like bad luck. It was, some things were bad luck. But the majority of it was, we're just gonna ignore shit. We're gonna lie about stuff, and we're gonna basically get in front of a narrative. And one would have to ask themselves, what did the police have any skin in the game with that this couldn't have been a burglar? Especially early on, like they did not know about Amber Fry. Why immediately could they not be okay with the whole of what truly happened? I think it has something to do with something else. Now, Scott did not have the right tools he needed to finish the assembling for the mortiser, so he left it partially assembled. He emailed his boss, did some work around the office, and then left for Berkeley. Now, under the prosecution's theory of the case, Scott's master plan was to kill his wife on the night of December 23, and then spend the next morning watching Martha Stewart and looking on the internet for sunflower umbrella stands, a garden weather vane, and Gap fleece scarves, then load Lacey's body into the back of his pickup truck and drive to his warehouse, where he spent roughly an hour assembling woodworking equipment and searching the internet for advice on how to assemble the woodworking equipment, while his wife's dead body and that of their unborn son were lying in the Greenlee toolbox in the back of his pickup truck. And when you say it just like that, if that doesn't get the dumbest of dumb persons to say to themselves, yeah, I mean, what the fuck is he doing? Like, again, under the prosecution's theory of this case, Scott's master plan was to kill his wife on the night of December 23rd and then spend the next morning watching Martha Stewart and and then posing. I would have put in there, posing a chair, where she's curling her hair, looking on the internet for sunflower umbrella stands, a garden weather vane, and Gap fleece scarves, then load Lacey's body into the back of his pickup truck and drive to his warehouse, where he spent roughly an hour assembling woodworking equipment and searching the internet for advice on how to assemble that woodworking equipment, while his wife's dead body is just laying in the Greeley toolbox in the back of his pickup truck. And just think, when you say it like that, it's just like, yeah, that's pretty fucking nuts, right? Now, that afternoon, Scott went to Berkeley Marina to put the boat in the water and go fishing. Berkeley Marina was Berkeley Marina was the closest saltwater launch ramp from Modesto. It would be the first and only time Scott ever fished in the bay, and the first time he had put the new boat in the water. Berkeley Marina is the largest marina in Northern California. Kim, yes, they wouldn't let that come into the courthouse. This is just stuff that came into the courthouse. Okay, so Berkeley Marina, again, is the largest in Northern California. There were 1,000 boat slips scattered around the marina, and among them were well over 100 boats, possibly closer to 200 boats, that had liveaboards on them, meaning that the boat owners were around 24 hours a day, who could be walking around, getting out of their boats at any time of the day. There were typically quite a few people out there, walking their dogs or just walking around the marina any day of the year. Some areas were heavily trafficked. There were 30 to 35 other marinas in the Bay Area that are smaller, much less trafficked, and have fewer people walking around than Berkeley. Had Scott wanted to surreptitiously dispose of his wife's body in the bay, there were a number of other marinas that would have been less populated with less activity going on. Scott drove to the public launch ramp at Berkeley Marina, shown above. I just showed you guys. Before heading to the marina that day, Scott had no reason to believe he could put the boat with his dead wife's body inside the fishing boat into the water at the public launch ramp, shown below, without being seen by other people who were walking their dogs and liveaboards coming and going from their boats. Yeah. Oh, but don't worry, guess what? I just left the cover on, right? Oh, we'll get to that. There is no evidence Scott researched the internet or called anyone at the Berkeley Marina to ask about whether it would be crowded that day. Scott had never used the launch ramp at Berkeley Marina before, so he opted to use the easternmost dock shown on that photo that I just showed you, on the far right in the photo, because there was more room to maneuver as he tried to back the trailer down into the water. Even so, Scott had some problems backing the boat trailer down the ramp and bumped the boat into the back of the wood dock. Now, the interview referenced in this exhibit are in the form of digital media that was previously filed with this court on January 17, 2024. Should the court require another copy, petitioner will promptly file an additional copy of that digital media. That was a footer. Also, the prosecution argued in closing that Scott, quote unquote, drives out there on a day when there's no one around. But there was no evidence showing Scott had ever used that marina before, which was the largest marina in the Northern California. Nor was there any evidence showing that he had any idea how much activity would be going on. So, as he started the, even so, Scott had some problems backing up. He said, after Scott tied up the boat at the dock, he left the boat there while he went to park the truck and trailer in the nearby parking lot and paid for parking using the Iron Maid. He started the boat and motored out into the marina, where he tested the motor by making a few turns before heading out to the bay to fish. Eyewitness Yuri Ferreira recalled seeing Scott launch the boat, and he did not recall seeing any objects inside the aluminum boat. He recalled seeing some type of camouflage clothing like a jacket or pants. Yuri left the country, and the jury did not hear from him. Oh my God. Wait, Yuri, why? Where are you at, Yuri? Yuri left the country, but jury didn't hear from him. Scott did not have a map of the area with him, but he had researched fishing in the bay on the internet. He motored out 2 miles to the north to a small island later identified as Brooks Island. There was trash he saw, pier blocks, and a sign that said no landing. He spent about an hour on the water and then headed back to the marina. Scott explained and described to police immediately upon reporting Lacey missing on December 24th exactly when and where he had gone fishing. When he arrived at the marina and when he left to return home. And he also provided them with this parking receipt, fishing license, and explained that others at the marina had seen him putting in his boat and they probably got a good chuckle. Scott estimated that he motored north for about 2 miles until he came to a small island. He saw there was no landing sign on the island. The prosecution argued that the fact that only 3 parking tickets were sold between December 23rd and December 27th showed how secluded and empty the marina was at that time of year. But paying for parking was done on the honor system. So the number of tickets sold is not necessarily an accurate indicator of how many boaters were using the public boat launch ramp on those days. This is the exhibit they use. How would Scott know that this was there? He really had to just go out there. It says no landing. It was an exhibit. Okay. Now, after fishing for an hour or so, Scott put the boat back onto the trailer at about 2:15 p.m. and headed back to Modesto. He planned to meet Lacey at home around 4. He tried to call Lacey on the way home, but got no answer. When Scott returned to Modesto from Berkeley, he dropped the boat off at the warehouse and arrived home around 4:30 p.m. He opened the gate. To the backyard and saw the dog, Mackenzie, wearing his leash. When he entered the house through the back door, he noticed it was unlocked. He was distracted when he entered the house because as soon as he opened the door, Mackenzie and both cats were right on his heels and headed straight to the mop. The mop bucket that was on the floor in the kitchen, filled with water and pine soil. Thinking the animals were going to drink from the bucket or knock it over, Scott grabbed the mop and the bucket, as anybody would do that has animals, and took them outside where he dumped out the water and left the mop and the bucket outside to dry. Lacey's Land Rover was parked in the driveway, but when he got inside the house, he discovered she was not home. Scott thought she had gotten a ride and already had gone to her parents' house to help with dinner. Lacey told Scott earlier that morning before he left for the day that she may go over earlier to help her mom prepare for dinner. When Scott arrived home, nothing seemed out of place inside the house. Look at these photos. When Scott arrived home that afternoon, everything inside the house looked orderly. There was no signs that anything was amiss. Photos that the police took on December 24th, they show that the house appeared to be orderly with no signs of foul play. The French toast recipe Lacey was using to prepare for the Christmas brunch the next day was sitting out on the counter next to the mixer. Scott told the police Lacey was making a marinade with the morning for French toast she was planning to make for Christmas brunch the next day, and the French toast recipe was out on the kitchen counter shown below. The only thing that seemed out of the ordinary to Scott was that it appeared Lacey was putting in a new Brita water filter and was possibly interrupted by something, because there were these 3 full glasses of water and what appears to be 1 empty glass sitting on top of the counter near the Brita water pitcher shown in the photo below. And this is where I had an aha moment, and I said, here we go. This is where Alana's brains kick in. Now, when I was reading this, again, people don't know about this, but it was out of character for Lacey to leave home with an unfinished project lying on the countertop like that. But fuck leaving home. She was in the middle of something, because if you go to www.brita.com, support water pitchers, your users will be instructed to replacing a Brita water filter to discard your first 3 containers worth of filtered water or use it to water plants. It's normal for the carbon dust to appear in your first few fillings. So if you have 3 cups that are full and you have 1 cup that is not full, that means that Lacey poured 3 cups, 3 glasses, and then the 4th one, after going for the walk, then the 4th one she poured and she actually drank. Okay, that's why the 4th one is empty. All right, and now look at, I don't know where. So you have, somebody can easily look out their window right here, right? But if Lacey had went for her walk, right, before because she's like to be a mouther, and she's on her way back and she says, I'm going to, hey, she either sees it, oh God, what the hell are these guys doing? Or I told them to get the hell out of here. I told them to leave. Now he's back. Now he brought a friend with the freaking, the van. Okay. I told him to leave, and the dude on the bike left. Now this motherfucker is back. And not only is he back, but he's got a fucking buddy with a car, with a van. Like, what the hell is going on? Okay. So after she would have had her glass, okay, then she's gonna go, out there and confront those fucking people again. But this right here tells me that it looks like she came and got a glass of water, but she couldn't remember because she just had put the filter in. Oh my God, did I clean it out already or did I not? Okay, I'll just do the 3 cups just in case. And for it to not to be back in the fridge, okay, that tells me that She's pouring those out. She poured a fourth one for herself. She's drinking that one. She's watching what the fuck's going on. Then she was like, okay, that's it. And puts it down and goes and does that with the people across the street. And that's why I believe that the Brit is out. So now, but the fourth glass is everything. And if you look, it's separate from the other ones. So you have the 3 over here and you have the fourth glass here. And the reason that she just didn't pour it all out in the 3 separate glasses is because she was actually going to use it for the plants. So, here we go. And people can say, well, she's supposed to do 3 full containers. Well, guess what Lacey did? Lacey did 3 fucking glasses, okay? You know, but isn't that pretty interesting? 3, that there would be 3 here. Maybe it was enough for her. Anyways. And then it was clearly filled up again, right? Because she could have been doing it a lot. Because then it was already filled up again. You see? This isn't like it's, you see how it has water in there? It's all the way up to here. So take a look at that shit. Isn't that great? So maybe she was doing 3 full, because then she re-put the water in, right? She refills it. And then she maybe just started using the 1 cup. Who the fuck knows? After she drank some. Or this could have been on the last go around. And those are the final 3 cups that she left. End of the day, all I can tell you is that this was refilled after the water's in there. And that tells me that you got interrupted right into this puppy, which is right in front of your window. Yeah. Let me get these bastards. Let me get these motherfuckers. After taking a shower, Scott checked the home phone answering machine and heard a message from Lacey's stepdad, Ron, asking them to bring whipped cream over when they came for dinner. At that point, Scott called his mother-in-law and learned that Lacey was not over there. Makes pretty much, I mean, makes sense. Also, the reason that they talk about in the beginning, when you're putting your clothes away, and I always just went and put my stuff into the washer right when I got home. That's why my clothes were in there, because I've been doing that ever since I had that bar. So Lacey's mom had not seen or spoken with Lacey all day and suggested he call some of Lacey's friends to see if they had heard from her. Scott called Lacey's sister, Amy, who had not heard from Lacey either. Amy described Scott's demeanor as panicked. No one had seen or heard from Lacey. He then went door to door in the neighborhood looking for Lacey. Neighbor Amy Craigbaum described his demeanor as very, very upset and distraught. Scott also knocked on the door of their neighbor, Karen, but she did not answer, so he left a note on her door asking if she had seen Lacey. When Scott told Sharon about Mackenzie having his leash on, her first thought was that Lacey must have been walking the dog. She thought they should look for her in the park. Sharon told Scott to go look for Lacey in the park and that Ron would call 911 and the local hospitals. Scott and Sharon agreed to meet in the park. Ron called 911 at about 5:48 p.m. on December 24th, 2002, to report Lacey as missing. Scott, Sharon, Amy, Ron, and other friends and family met at East La Loma Park near Lacey and Scott's home to look for Lacey. Scott was at East La Loma Park near their home, frantically searching for Lacey when MPD officer John Evers located him and asked for permission to search the Peterson's home, and that would be around 6:11 p.m. Scott immediately agreed and was escorted back to the house by officers, or by Officer Evers. While police searched the interior and perimeter of the home to secure it, people were starting to gather. The police had quartered off the house, so no one, including Scott, was allowed to enter the house. The scene was stressful and chaotic. After the security sweep of the house, Scott walked through the house with officers showing them Lacey's purse and confirming that nothing appeared to be out of place. Oh my God, Caper girl. Hey, kick her out. Kick her out. You couldn't have watched the case from day one. It wasn't televised. Get out. Bye. Get out. Don't be spreading misinformation in my chat. Bye. Peace. This was not televised. I don't think anybody understands that. I was watching the trial. Well, then you must have been watching, I don't know, a different trial. There was no pictures of anchors, none of the sort. Stick around and learn about what's going on, or don't. From day one. You like that, Boston? Boston knows when I get rowdy. Get the fuck out of here. From day one, man. Day one, every day. I didn't go to work for 23 straight weeks. All right. Yeah, actually, I saw so much coverage you would think that it was covered, right? But guess what? It wasn't. And guess who was just providing us with all this false shit? It's kind of like the Delphi case, man. Go listen to certain people talk about the Delphi case, and you would be thinking, "Oh my God, were they in the same courtroom together? Oh my God, wait, what?" That's two today, Lana. I know. I usually just ignore people too. I just fuck that. So anyways, here we go, back at it. So Scott immediately helped the police locate Lacey's purse inside a closet, like I said, in their bedroom, and identified Lacey's keys, wallet, and sunglasses, all of which were inside the purse. So here's a question that I want answered, okay, which is, if Lacey's purse was in the closet in the bedroom, right? When she would go walking, if it's not a great area, like, what would she take with her? You know, her phone, by the way, was in her car, like plugged in and everything. So I'm just curious about that. Like, what would she do with her keys? The reason that there's an important reason for it is that if she would go walking, was the house unlocked? Because when she would get back, I mean, is she walking with her keys, but the keys are in the purse? You know what I'm saying? I'm just curious of their habits when they would go walking, what their habits were. They don't talk about it. So, anyways, an MPD evidence technician photographed the Petersons' home that evening. Detective Broccini found numerous items in the Petersons' house to be suspicious. This is hilarious. Detective Broccini testified that he was immediately suspicious of Scott on December 24th as he searched the house and vehicles before he had interviewed Scott or conducted any investigation into Lacey's disappearance. Now, I want to thank whoever went ahead and did this, but I am going to close out today's episode with this, and it's hard to find this. Well, it was hard to find. And then I don't know if this guy that did this interview, if he reposted this recently. But I was like, whoever interviewed these ass clowns. Here we go.
is the Amber's friend who had introduced Scott to Amber.
By me and Connor. And whenever the phone rings at night, I know it's probably work and it's bad news, but it was my sergeant. And Sergeant Al Carter told me that there was a missing person in Modesto, and she was pregnant, and the officers on scene were wanting to have a detective come out and assist in their investigation. So I told him I'd go, and it was Christmas Eve, and we were having dinner with my kids and my wife, and I finished my dinner, and I got in my car, and I started heading towards Modesto, about an hour and a half away. When I arrived at Covina, which was the unusual part was...
Okay, Covina, I have a question. You are a Modesto detective? And you lived an hour and a half from this location?
There was a lot of people there in the driveway. I mean, there was, thermoses of coffee. People were already putting up flyers, and I met with the sergeant and the officers, and they kind of briefed me, and then they introduced me to Scott. And I introduced myself to him, and I asked him to walk me through the house and kind of walk me through the day and tell me what he knew about when he last saw Lacey.
Yes. Tell us about it.
I've been around the block a few times, and I was just thinking it was a missing person case.
Nope.
I mean, I could hear on my way down, I could hear the helicopters over the radio when cops would talk. I heard they were in the park searching. So I knew they were searching. And when I met Scott, I've never met him before. He seemed like a nice guy, just there to do my job. Scott walked me through the house, showed me his house. He allowed me to search his cars, his truck and her car. There was some things that were unusual for me, from my gut feelings. I wasn't feeling like, oh, he did something to her yet, but I had unusual or gut feelings about things. I mean, like when I searched his truck, I opened the back door and it accidentally hit her Land Rover, and he was right jolly on the spot with a, "Hey, Al," and he called me Al right from the beginning. "Hey, Al, I'll move my truck, or can I put this glove between the door and the Land Rover?" And I said, "Hey, Scott, I'll be a little more careful. I'm not going to, I won't do that again." But I mean, I'm thinking, okay, your wife's missing and you're focused right now on, I bumped the door into the truck. And so I just that was unusual. And then in the truck, in the back of the truck, I noticed there was some umbrellas all wrapped in a blue tarp. And I asked him, I said, what's this, Scott? And he says, "Oh, those are my outdoor umbrellas. I'm going to move them to the shop." And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, okay, why not just throw them in the truck, move them to the shop and put them in there? But he's got them all wrapped up in a blue tarp. That was kind of weird. And then there was another big tarp in the back of the truck, all just kind of bunched up back there. And I just noted those things. And when I searched the interior of the truck, he had told me it was his decision to go fishing that morning. But in the truck, I found a receipt from Big Five where on the 20th, he had purchased a 2-day fishing license and dated it the 23rd and 24th. And so I thought that didn't add up. And he told me that when he got home, he took all his clothes off and put them in the washing machine because they were wet. And the jacket he was wearing when he was fishing was in his truck, and it wasn't wet. And so I'm just noting these things in my head, and they're not adding up the way I would expect them to be. And so I just kept noting those things and moved on. I asked him if he would take me to where the boat was, his shop, and he agreed, and we went over to the shop. And all during this time, I'm telling Scott, there's cops and detectives searching, knocking on doors, interviewing people. But my primary job with you, Scott, is to eliminate you or not eliminate you yet, but my job is to, I don't want to say eliminate, but eliminate you as any kind of a suspect. And so I have to ask you hard questions. And my experience tells me you're not going to like me very much by the end of this. He agreed, and he said that he understood, and he would answer all my questions. And then I asked him to come back to the police department for an interview.
When did you realize you're going to go fishing?
This is it says 1 a.m. Okay. 1 a.m. This is the first time that they recorded him, 1 a.m., and they've been with him, though, since 6:11 p.m. Okay. Also,
Morning decision is either go to the morning, so play golf at the club or go fishing. Okay. Seemed too cold to go play golf at the club, so she told me what she was going to do for the day. And okay, so she told you what she was going to do for the day. Yeah. And
police asked Scott where his clothes were that he had worn earlier that day, and he told them he had come home and put them straight into the washing machine before he realized Lacey was missing or that something may have happened to her. Scott explained to the police that he had to take some cleaning rags out of the washer that their housekeeper, Margarita, had put in there. The cleaning rags were piled up on the top of the washer shown below. Like, there's a picture of it. Detective Roccini found it suspicious that there were dirty rags piled up on top of the washer and directed another officer to collect them so that they could be forensically examined. Again, this was without Scott's knowledge or consent. Margarita explained to police that she had to use the rags when she cleaned the house the day before, and that the rags were dirty because she used them to clean the inside of the fireplace screen and also the outside windows. Scott explained to police that he routinely put his clothes straight into the washer when he came home because they smelled like the fertilizer product he worked around and his warehouse, and he did not want to smell up the bedroom or the clothes hampers with those smelly clothes. The police asked Scott about the mop and bucket that were outside the door leading to the front courtyard, and he explained when he got home that afternoon, the animals ran into the house, and soon as he opened the door and headed straight out to the mop bucket, so he grabbed it, blah, 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 right?
okay. She's going to finish cleaning up. Like I said, she's locked in the kitchen floor. Take the dog for a walk, and then she's going to the store to buy for Christmas morning breakfast tomorrow.
Lacey asked her to place the mop outside to dry. The bucket was placed on top of the washing machine along with the rack. The bucket and mop were found outside. That's what he did right.
Well, so when I interviewed Scott, I mean, during the interview, I didn't really notice a lot. I mean, I'm just talking to him and he's answering my question. But then later when I sit back and I watch it and I watch it, I mean, he's got his hands in his pockets. I mean, he's leaning back in the chair. I mean, it's comfortable. And I mean, I think at one point too, the phone rang and I mean, he looked at it, he goes, oh, that's just so-and-so. And he didn't even answer it. And I'm thinking, okay, what if that was so-and-so saying, hey, Lacey's over at my house? But
oh my God,
he knew she wasn't coming back. And
wait a second.
But I didn't know it when I was.
Dude, you're sick. You're sick. That actually it was Scott. Scott was like, dude, I'm standing out here. The phone is ringing. I'm gonna go answer it because it could be my wife, and they wouldn't let him in the house. I don't even know if you were there yet, Big Al. When they were searching it, I don't even know if you were there yet, Big Al.
Talking to him, I'm starting after I'm watching it, then I'm getting those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you got to about 5 minutes to 1, you get your boat in. How long do you think you stayed in the water? Felt like an hour and a half or so. Would you be willing for me to take a gunshot residue off your hands? Sure.
Gunshot residue.
Board exhaust show up as gunshot residue or something different? What? Exhaust? Yeah, from that outboard. Well,
you showered after you said, so I'm not thinking this is even going to be good, but no, it wouldn't. Did you have a map for that area, or no? Would you just wing it? So you just, when you got in your boat, you took off. Did you go very far? Or?
Well, I mean, probably a couple miles north, found like a little island kind of deal there. Island had a bunch of trash on it. I remember a big sign that said no landing. There was like some real piers around it, and I just assumed it would be a decent, shallow area.
Christmas Day, I get a call from Al Brocchini in the morning, right about 9 o'clock. And first thing he does, he asks me what I'm doing. I said, well, you probably remember what I'm doing. I'm taking my kids over to their mom's.
It's Christmas. What the fuck you think I'm doing?
And I'm thinking, well,
This guy is a fucking liar. And he's running around parading right now all over mainstream media. Keep having him on, Ashley. Keep having him
is a
on.
call for overtime. And I asked him what's going on. He said he had a missing, that he was working, and I asked him if he needed any help. And he said he did. He told me that he'd actually worked on this case from the prior evening on Christmas Eve. He had been called out to talk to Scott and interview him regarding Lacey being missing. And in the process of doing this, he didn't find anything that was obvious that made him think that Scott had done anything wrong. But Scott's demeanor was a little bit too calm compared to the other family members. And he had documented a bunch of things that were essential later on in the investigation, like no forced entry into the house, and Scott's demeanor, and specific things that Scott did when he came back from fishing. When it came to his conversations, I remember the one that was suspicious to me from the start. Brocchini played it for me on that first day, on Christmas Day, when Scott was coming back from Berkeley Marina. He'd made a call to Lacey. Her cell phone battery was dead. People had known that, but he left a message. And it was words to the effect of, hey, beautiful, I'm coming back from fishing and I'm not going to be able to make it to Vela Farms. Can you go pick up that gift basket for Papa? And I love you. And it just,
He didn't say he was coming back from fishing. He said he was coming back from Berkeley. Okay.
it's just, the tone of it to me was scripted, phrased in a way to show that he was devoted to this girl. And I don't want to have the suspicion on me. So I'm leaving this recording to get you guys on a different track. So we're suspicious of a lot of things.
But you weren't suspicious of a burglary across the street. Awesome.
Because people that to talk to detectives oftentimes have a reason to lie. And so you have to verify these through a variety of different ways.
Hey, beautiful. I just left a message at home. 2:15. I live in Berkeley. I won't be able to get to Vela Farms to get that basket for Papa. I was hoping you would get this message and go on out there.
Let me tell you what else they think is suspicious. Police also thought it was suspicious that a phone book was on the kitchen bar, open to a page that had an attorney's name on it, depicted below. Scott explained to police that he grabbed the telephone book because he was planning to start calling hospitals to look for Lacey. And when he dropped the phone book on the kitchen bar, it automatically opened to a page in the middle of the phone book made of heavy cardstock that had advertisements on it. Scott told the police he abandoned the plan to call hospitals and left the phone book on the kitchen bar when his mother-in-law told him that, hey, Ron would call around to hospitals and Scott should just go straight to the park to search for Lacey. Not until months later did Detective Grogan pull the phone book out of evidence to test Scott's explanation about why the book was open to that page. Guess what? He concluded Scott had been telling the truth. Because it did. It opened up right to that page.
I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
End of message.
But in addition to that, he said that we had to go back out there and talk to Scott a little bit more, which was fine with me because I hadn't met him yet. And we pulled up on Covina, facing south, pulled up next to the house on the curb there. And I saw Scott to the left. He was walking from the southeast to the northwest. And we got out of the car. Al greeted him. You remembered Al from the prior evening. And Al introduced me to Scott. And first impression, like anybody's first impression of Scott, is pleasant, friendly, very controlled. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't frantic or anything like that. He did have a lot of questions for us, which seemed kind of strange for me, but I'd only been with him for a few moments at that time. So right after that, I went over to talk to them.
Okay, this is the first detective that I've ever heard say that asking questions is strange. Like the detectives in the Chris Watts case said opposite. Like, he didn't ask us any questions like when, well, if we would call him, oh, hey, did you find her? Or you got any, what'd you hear? Like thinking that, like, hey, like asking questions. Okay. What's going on? Why are you guys all here? Who's out looking for my wife? If you guys are all here doing this, I get it. You guys think that husband, I did something. I understand, but who's actually looking for Lacey? But I just, so we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we ask questions, we're fucks. If we don't ask questions, we're fucks. I mean, Jesus.
The neighbor to the south, Karen Service, to get more details from her, specifically when she found the dog, how she found the dog, and the things that were taking place on Christmas Eve for her that day. Now, Karen was like one of the neighbors that you would really want to have living next door to you.
I bet you
She
did.
was very friendly. She was very accurate about things that she remembered from the day prior.
Karen was someone that you were like, weren't you, John Bueller?
As far as finding the dog with the leash, putting the dog back in the Peterson's backyard. In addition to that, she had left to go shopping in downtown Modesto, and she had a receipt for a purchase that she made that helped us determine the time between when Scott left the house and when the dog was discovered. And that was very helpful to show that there wasn't a lot of time between when Scott pulled out of the driveway and the dog was found. So she gave us background information about Scott and Lacey. She'd been to their house many times for barbecues and events and things like that. And just good neighbors, nothing bad to say about either one of them. Scott was very helpful to her at her house. Scott was handy, so he could fix things because she was living alone at that time. And again, just it started.
You wanted to tap it, didn't you? Didn't you, Daddy? Dirty Daddy.
Started to become a common theme that we were finding that everybody.
How many ways can you say, oh yeah, she was like, everyone would want her as a neighbor. Yeah, she was living alone at that time.
Everybody pretty much loved Scott.
Everybody loved him. Karen's written statement.
One of the things that came up when I first met Scott, and this existed throughout all of our contacts, which were pretty much always pleasant. Scott was pretty easy to deal with. His cooperation was guarded, and it was limited. If we got into areas that he didn't want to go into, he would.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay, after walking the police through the house and answering all of their questions, the house was secured and Scott was told to go back outside and continue standing in the driveway. Many family and friends were gathering to help look for Lacey. The police did not permit Scott to leave the property so he could knock on doors or talk to neighbors, nor was he permitted to enter the house while police continued searching inside, except in one instance when Scott was escorted inside and allowed to retrieve photos of Lacey to give out to volunteer searchers after pleading with an officer to let him inside. He wanted to make these flyers. The officer who escorted Scott inside to get the photos insisted on approving every photo Scott wanted to give to the volunteer searchers. Like, what? While standing in the driveway as instructed, Scott heard the phone ringing inside the house, but no one was answering the phone. Concerned that it could be Lacey calling or someone calling about Lacey, Scott tried to go inside the house to answer the phone, but was stopped by an officer at the gate. Scott told the officer he was concerned that it could be Lacey calling, but the officer would not let him in to answer the phone. It's funny that this came out after this declaration and all this stuff came out. It's funny that they're trying to, once again, spin this shit. Fat fucking Al. Oh, the phone's ringing. He just not even answering it. Fucking lying pig. Still in the driveway, a friend of Scott's walked up and told him he had been walking around the neighborhood, talking to people, and had spoken to a neighbor who said a strange incident happened late the night before when a man knocked on the door asking for money. Scott started walking down the street with his friend so he could talk to the neighbor about what occurred. Before he could make it very far, a police officer chased him down and escorted him back to the driveway. Also, while standing outside, Scott tried calling some of his family members in San Diego, but was having trouble reaching them when the numbers he had stored in his cell phone. So he wanted to go inside the house to get Lacey's phone book that had additional phone numbers, including landline numbers, but the police would not allow Scott inside the house to get the phone numbers he needed. Scott was getting very frustrated and already feeling like the police suspected him of being involved in Lacey's disappearance. Now, when I heard this next thing, I literally fell over and fucking... Scott's alibi, fishing versus playing golf. By all accounts, the scene outside in front of the Peterson's home and on Covina Avenue, the night was fairly chaotic. Between 50 to 100 friends, family members, and concerned citizens showed up over the course of the evening. This was on Christmas Eve to help in the search. When Scott and Lacey were at Amy's salon on December 23rd, Scott told Lacey and Amy he would pick up a gift basket they had ordered from their for their grandfather from Bella Farms for the next day because it was located near the golf course where he was planning to go play golf. The next morning, Scott changed his mind and decided to take the boat out so he could test the motor before giving the boat to Ron for the surprise. On the evening of December 24th, when the police responded to Lacey's missing person report, Scott immediately told the police he had gone to Berkeley Marina to not only fish, but to put the boat in the water. He handed them the parking ticket from Berkeley Marina where he parked and showed them his fishing license and boat because they asked him. Scott told police he had made the decision to take the boat out on the water on Christmas Eve morning because it was too cold to play golf. When he was driving back to Modesto from Berkeley, he called Lacey to tell her blah, blah, blah. The prosecution argued at trial that Scott originally planned to secretly go to the bay to dump his wife's body there and then get back, go hang out at the golf club where he played golf, maybe have a drink at the bar, screw around a little bit. But it took him longer than he planned. He was going to say, yeah, I was at work checking my computer. Yeah, I was there. See, the prosecution's argument to the jury continued. And I went to the club and, you'll have some people that will see him and say, yeah, he was there. He just screwed up. He screwed up his alibi, end quote, to the jury. The prosecution argued that Scott was unable to use the golf alibi because some maintenance men saw him when he was at the marina, so he had to change his alibi. I said to myself, wait, what? Then why the fuck would he leave the goddamn message at 2:15, you dumb fucking fat fuck? Get out of here. That is crazy. After talking to Scott, Sharon, and Ron, Sharon asked Ron to call 911 to report Lacey missing so he could rush to the park to look for Lacey, where Lacey was believed to have been walking the dog. Moments later, when Ron Gransky called 911, and the very first thing he told police, even before describing Lacey or what she was wearing, this is the transcripts. 911, emergency dispatch, hi, how can I help you? Gransky, yes, my son-in-law called. He'd been playing golf. This morning. Left at 9:30. My daughter's been missing since this morning. She's 8 months pregnant. She took her dog for a walk in the park. What? Yeah, my son-in-law called. He'd been playing golf. Immediately thereafter, at around 6:30 p.m., okay, Gransky called Sharon's relatives, Harvey and Gwen Kemple, so they could come assist in the search for Lacey at the park. Gwen testified at trial that they immediately headed to the park where she saw Sharon Rocha, who was hysterical. From the park, Gwen went to the Peterson's house where she saw Scott and asked him where he had been all day, and he told her he had gone fishing. Harvey Kemple testified that he went to the Petersons' home to assist, and that when he arrived, Scott told him he went to play golf that day. Although Harvey spoke with police that night, he did not mention that Scott said he had been playing golf. He's fucking cocksy. By the time Kemple was interviewed by law enforcement 6 months later, he had easily told dozens of people, if not more, that Scott told him he had gone golfing that day. That's what he testified. Amy Krigbaum lived across the street from Peterson's. Scott knocked on her door when he came home and saw that Lacey was not there. He was very upset and distraught. Krigbaum testified that she went to the park where she saw Lacey's mom and gave her a flashlight. When she got back home, Lacey's family and friends were coming over and using her restroom pretty much throughout the evening because the house was shut down. In earlier interviews with police, Krigbaum told officers that when she went to the park, there was a lot of commotion and there was a lot of people there. She recalled that Scott said that he had been golfing. Okay, check this out. When she was interviewed on January 22nd, 2003, she told Brocheni that she could not remember everything Scott had said when he came over to the door because he was nervous, and that made her nervous, and she just could not remember everything he said. At trial, however, Krigbaum testified that when Scott came to her door that night, he said that he had been golfing that day. Talk about, who are these people? What are these? I mean, this is investigators fucking with shit.
Mention his attorney and that he'd have to run that information by his attorney. Pretty unusual for us in a situation like this. Usually people don't do that. They have the right to do it, but generally they don't. They don't put.
So it's unusual for us to ask for our attorneys or to ask what we should do about a lie detector test. Okay, sounds good, buddy. Who do you think you're fucking talking to?
Limits on their cooperation. But comparing Scott from the day I met him all the way until the last time I saw him, he never showed any frantic desire to figure out what happened to Lacey compared to her mom, Sharon, her sister, Amy, her brother, Brent. Everybody that was from Lacey's circle, whether it was Stacy or Lori or Renee or Kim or Ron Gransky, Dennis Rocha, Lacey's father, everybody was frantic about where she was, what happened to her, when she was coming back, with the exception of Scott. Now, this could mean that he just had an enormous amount of self-control, which I believe he does. But it also, I've seen it before in other cases where I had guys like this that didn't show that. So it was something I'd seen before. It didn't mean that he had killed her, but because of his demeanor and because of his limited cooperation, it just meant that we had to keep digging until we could find out that he either didn't have anything to do with Lacey's disappearance or enough evidence came up to show us that he did.
Keeping all angles open right now, but from talking to the family and friends of the family who are been extremely cooperative and helpful in this investigation, this is completely out of character for her and her lifestyle.
Scott was very cooperative when it came to giving a timeline on what he was doing when he was talking to Al Brocchini. So he explained that he had loaded some patio umbrellas into the back of his pickup truck. And he had these in the backyard, and he was moving those.
They are obsessed with these goddamn umbrellas. Check this out. So, after calling 911, Ron Gransky searched the park for a few hours before coming to the Peterson home. Okay. Ron asked Scott, in the presence of police officers, how his golf game was that day. And Scott told Ron in front of the officers that he had not played golf, but had gone fishing. I have a question. Okay. I have a very serious question. Why the fuck is he asking me how my golf game went? Let's even say that I would have went to play golf. I cannot imagine that that's what you'd be asking me. I'm an avid golfer, okay? Played college golf. I don't think my parents would be asking me how my golf game was at that moment. Or in-laws of mine. And he's like, I didn't go. I had gone fishing. At no point did Scott purposely tell the police or anyone, Lacey's mom, Lacey's stepdad, or Amy Craig mom, or Tara, any of these people, that he had been golfing. As Scott immediately told Gwen Kemple that night when she asked him where he had been that day, and as immediately told the police when they arrived and asked him where he had been that day, he told them he had gone fishing, and he proved and provided with them the proof that he had gone to the Berkeley Marina. Also, he left it on her fucking voicemail at 2:15. Scott immediately told Officer Evers, the first officer to arrive, that he went fishing and gave Evers his receipt from the Berkeley Marina. Scott immediately told Officer Spurlock and Letzinger that he had gone fishing. Scott immediately told Detective Brocchini that he had went fishing and took Brocchini to the warehouse to see the boat. Scott never hid the fact that he went fishing, and there are no instances where people thought Scott was golfing except in the initial hours of confusion when Lacey was first reported missing on December 24th because of fucking Ron in the 911 call. The night Lacey was reported missing, Scott was forthcoming with police about all of his activities that day, including at the warehouse, at the marina, and on the water. He told them exactly where he had fished, and he immediately gave them his fishing license and parking stub. The prosecution nevertheless falsely argued that Scott lied about numerous details regarding his activities on December 24th. For example, Scott told police he left the bay because it had started to rain, and he washed his clothes when he came home that afternoon because they were wet from being out on the water. This is just such prosecutorial misconduct, such unethical bullshit. Okay. Well, that's going to end episode 4. I hope that you enjoyed this, and you'll be joining me back to find out more about the crazy fucking things that this police unit and DAs and prosecutors did.
Was over to his warehouse so they wouldn't be around apparently during the holiday season. And as he did that, he had the truck backed in the driveway. And a couple of the neighbors had mentioned they had never, ever seen him back the truck in the driveway.
None of this is true. No, nobody testified to this. In fact, nobody could testify to it because remember, I was just telling you about that woman that they hypnotized who actually said, no, the truck was facing forward. Look at this sweating pig.
The neighbors had mentioned they had never, ever seen him back the truck in the driveway. So when he backed it in, it was real handy. The back of the truck was right by the door that goes out from the, it's kind of like a TV room that they had in the front of the house. It was a converted garage. And there was a side door on the north side that went out to the truck. And he loaded the patio umbrellas into the truck. My belief is he loaded those on top of Lacey as a way to disguise her so that if anybody looked in the bed of the truck, they wouldn't see her. She was probably wrapped up in something. I don't know what it was. There was all sorts of different theories on whether it was a blue tarp.
Wait, why do you need theories? You know what? I can't even leave yet. Wait, why do you need theories? If you had all this material and you tested it all, forensically tested everything, nothing. You got no hits, no sense, no test, there's no blood, there's no tissue, nothing of Lacey, and as in on anything that you think that you're talking about here was wrapped up near her, anything, you fucking lying cunts. This is so fucking egregious.
Or whether it was a blanket or anything.
Now I know why you were spending alone time on December 25th. Who would ever be married to a liar in a mouth like fucking a mix of Bart Simpson's dad and grandfather?
Like that. But it fits with some little minor evidence things that were noted.
And a touch of Jerry Sandusky.
Just early on, there was a throw rug that was by this door that goes out to the north side of the house by the carport.
Look at this.
And that throw rug was bunched up by the door. Now, Scott gave the explanation to that the cat or the dog had done that. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But it wouldn't be inconsistent with dragging a dead body from the bedroom across the floor through that TV room out to the truck and bunching up the rug in the process. So the
right there,
thing about
murder.
the patio umbrellas that was kind of interesting was he didn't leave them at the warehouse. He did bring them back to the house after he returned from the fishing trip. And so that's it by itself, it really means nothing. But when you start categories of evidence and you start putting these things
What category would that fall under? These umbrellas.
together and adding them up,
With what?
you start making a list of circumstantial evidence
What?
that doesn't make sense.
That the umbrellas were where? Left in his truck?
And the umbrellas being returned were part of that. So when Scott left
Oh. Didn't it start raining that night? What did he tell you?
the house, we were able to determine through cell phone records and where his cell phone was pinging on the antennas that he drove to his warehouse over in West Modesto near the freeway, and he stayed there for a certain period of time. His explanation while he was there is he checked his
No, actually, that got ixnayed, that you could use cell towers and do anything like that because he didn't make a call. He called his voicemail. So you couldn't do anything like that. You piece of shit. And this got testified to at trial. So you're just still going on with this narrative. I mean, did you guys all have to leave the courtroom if it wasn't your testimony? Have you ever sat and actually read the transcripts of this trial?
email. He had a mortising tool that he had been delivered for woodworking and that he partially assembled while he was there.
What with the dead body there, right?
And then he backed the truck in and hooked
Who said that he backed the truck in? Facts, not in evidence. Nobody testified to that, you cocksucker.
up the boat trailer to the truck, and then he drove up to Berkeley Marina, launched the boat,
After he smashed into the side of the dock, right?
piloted the boat north through the bay towards Brooks Island. He had specific details about the sign that was on Brooks Island as far as you can't land here, you can't get on the island, there's no
Maybe
trespassing
he was going to put the body on the island or something.
there. And then he came back. He had a timed stamped parking permit that he'd gotten when he pulled into the parking lot there at Berkeley Marina. Apparently some guys saw him either launching his boat or recovering his boat with the trailer, trying to load it. And I guess he backed a trailer about the way I would, not very skilled. And they made some remarks on it and he was noticed. And I'm not sure if that was the reason that he finally changed his alibi that originally.
What are you talking about that he finally changed his alibi?
He had told earlier was going to be for golfing.
Who?
Who
did he tell that to? What an idiot. I cannot believe you're trying to get in front of this. You can't get in front of it.
day before, when he had gotten his hair cut by Lacey's sister, Amy, he had mentioned to her that on Christmas Eve, he was going to go golfing at Del Rio Country Club. He'd also told this to Ron Gransky, who was Lacey's
No, he didn't. He didn't talk to Ron.
stepdad, Sharon's longtime companion. And later on, he changed that alibi. He said it was too cold to go golfing, so he decided to go fishing. Well, that doesn't make much sense to me. You go out on the water, it's going to be colder on the water than it is going to be on the golf course. And then, of course, you're driving 80 miles to go up to Berkeley to launch your boat. It didn't seem to make too much sense when he could just go up to the Sierras, up to Woodward Reservoir, maybe 30 miles away, and launch his boat up there. But regardless, this is one of the things that he did when he went there. Now, there's been people in the past that have made remarks about Lacey being in the bed of the truck and that she could have been spotted. Well, maybe she could have been if she wasn't wrapped up, if she wasn't disguised, if she wasn't under the pants.
Oh yeah, wrapped up in all that stuff that has no forensic evidence that she was ever wrapped in it, you dumbass. I mean, do you not know science? Like, you don't think anything would have gotten on the tarp or the fucking, just nothing. Lacey's not going to be getting hit with the dogs. I mean, why'd you keep the dogs away from the truck? What are you people smoking? And the only reason the jury didn't come back with not guilty is because you had to switch out the jurors on 2 occasions, which made them restart it 3 times. And those people were just like, fine, fuck it. I'll fucking say not guilty, or I'll say guilty. That's how you got the guilty. That's how you got that. I totally forgot about the whole that I knew there was 1 juror issue, but I did not know there was 2. And you have to start back from the beginning. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Unbelievable.
Umbrellas. But also, this is on Christmas Eve, and there wasn't a lot of activity at this warehouse. It was kind of like a strip mall warehouse, overhead doors, things like that.
You know how heavy a dead body is? You have any idea how heavy a dead body is? Yeah.
But
do you have any idea how small that boat was? Yeah. Scott and Lacey and the boat would have tipped the fuck over if you would have tried to do what you guys think he did. Not to mention that there's just no evidence of it, but go ahead and try it. Why don't you get out there and practice it?
There was no flurry of activity before the holidays because it wasn't a retail kind of situation where people are shopping. So it would have been real easy for him to back the truck partially into the warehouse itself and transfer Lacey's wrapped up body into the boat, cover.
How would it be so easy? Let me see your old fucking ass. I will go get you a truck. I will get you this boat, and I will get you what? 190 pounds? What? How much would she weigh when she's pregnant? What? 180? I have no idea. 150? Let me see you take the body from wherever you think it was in the back of the truck to then putting it into the boat. Let me see you do that. Let me see how that works for you.
The boat with the boat cover and then hook the trailer up to the truck and drive up to Berkeley. And once he got up there, he said he took the boat out for a while. He said he did some fishing, but he was never specific with any of the officers or even with Brocchini as far as what he was fishing for. He had a 2-day fishing license that he had purchased on December 20th, but he had not filled in the date as far as when he was going to be fishing when he purchased the license. So that, to me, also goes along with some premeditation because it was open-ended as far as if or when he was going to kill Lacey. But in addition to that, his packages of lures, which were for freshwater fishing, substantially different from saltwater fishing, had not even been opened. So
you haven't been opened, but he told you because he didn't use those. He didn't use those, you fucking piece of shit. What was on the fishing poles? Look at you, man. You still gotta fucking convince yourself, don't you, buddy? Because 22 years is a long time. You know that y'all just got your asses sued $22.5 million. You guys just got your asses pounded.
boat did test positive for having salt water in the
what was
lures, which were for freshwater fishing.
What was it?
Substantially different from saltwater fishing, had not even been opened. So the boat did test positive for having salt water in the motor and in the bottom of the boat.
And guess what? That boat, that was the first time it would have ever been in there in salt water because the owner that just had sold to him on the 7th or 8th of December said that he'd always had freshwater, right? Mm-hmm.
But there was no evidence that he was doing any fishing, and he couldn't speak specifically about fishing. Whereas if you go across the street here to my neighbor's house and you mention fishing for him to him, he'll talk to you for 3 hours.
You didn't say he was an avid fisher, you fucking idiot. What? Who is this man? God, you guys need to go and get, I'm telling you, go look up Jerry Sandusky from Penn State.
We look for
Fucking little, he looks like his twin.
answers on things like that. And that's what we were doing with Scott.
Okay, so one thing
Here we go, Big Al.
that I found interesting or during the investigation was Scott was telling me how concerned he was because he couldn't get a hold
Yes,
of
Dan,
Lacey.
that's
He
awesome.
went fishing. He called her twice from the boat ramp. Then he called her again from the gas station. And he's concerned because he's not getting a hold of her. And so then he goes back to the shop, drops the boat off, goes home, and he finds his dog running around with a leash. That's pretty concerning to him too. And then he finds the door unlocked. He says that's really concerning to him. But he's really nervous. He's concerned. But what does he do? He goes in and
He didn't say this. And you didn't record anything, so you can say whatever you want. He said that when he got home, what? That she's not there. Okay, she must have gone over early and she must have got on a ride. He plays the I pressed play on the answering machine. Here's that message, and he's like, well, what the fuck? Why then she can't be there if you're leaving this message? Like, what the hell's going on? Seems pretty normal.
washes the clothes he's wearing.
He didn't say that he washed him, you piece of shit. He put him in the wash machine. He just you put him in there. Did he say I just started washing my clothes, or say I put them in there? Because he had to move the rags, remember? He had to take the rags out. But even if he says that he did wash them, you guys, if that's something that he always does, and these people that are the family wouldn't know. Lacey's family knows if he does that or not. You know why? Because your family and you're so close, you would talk about things. Oh my God, I have to have Scott always just go right to the fucking wash because his shit just would start smelling up all of my clothes. And literally, come on, open up your mouths. The family needs to start speaking up. If he did that, you need to say that, yes, that's exactly what he did.
The dirty stuff out of the washer. There's a hamper full of clothes, but he only washes his shirt and his pants, what he was wearing. And then he eats some pizza. Then he takes a shower, gets dressed. Then he calls Ron and Sharon and basically says, Lacey's missing. You know where she's at? I mean, so
that's not what he said.
He's real concerned.
That's not what he did. No,
his actions
no.
aren't showing he's concerned.
No.
His actions.
He asked her if Lacey was over there. You fucking piece of shit. You piece of shit. You do understand that your ass is on the hot seat. I get it though. You were trying to get in front of it, baby, but it's not gonna work.
You're showing, something else. And so I think that concerned me.
What concerned you?
Leaving the leash on the dog and leaving the gate open. The dog, he knows the dog's going to run around, and it was a rainy day. And
so now it was raining? What are you smoking, man? Dude, I can't. Somebody stop me.
Neighbor found the dog and put it back and shut the gate. But yeah, I think that was part of his plan.
Oh, what about the mailman that said that the gate was open and there was no dog? What about that, huh? Where's that at?
The people whoever has Lacey, the reward is $500,000. Take the money, bring my daughter back safe, and take the money and go and get away free. Get out of here. Just go with the money. Take the reward and go. Thank you.
God, I feel so bad for my dad. I feel bad.
The Medina home, which is directly across the street from the Petersons, was burglarized around the same time as Lacey Peterson would have went missing while walking her dog. A local resident, a woman by the name of Diane Jackson, told authorities that as she drove by in the direction of the park, and this would have been on December 24th at about 11:40 a.m. She saw a van parked in front of the Medina home. 3 men were next to the van and glared at Diane Jackson as she drove by.
You guys, this case is Karen Reed, but in 20.
One of the pieces of evidence or things that happened during this case that we had to deal with was there was a burglary across the street from Scott's house, and this occurred right around the same time as Lacey went missing. And so we had a group of detectives assigned to the burglary case.
If you run it out to a logical conclusion, if the burglars abducted Lacey, first off, if they're going to try and frame Scott, they're not going to hide the body on the bottom of San Francisco Bay. Are they going to take the risk to transport the body when everybody's looking for Lacey from Modesto to San Francisco Bay? Much different than when Scott.
I don't think I'm so glad that we can leave this right here then, because that's not where they put the body in. Because where Lacey and Connor's bodies were found aren't. If you would have actually went to that marina and went in fishing in that water, it's actually when you go to this old landfilled area that you come up the Albany Bulb and you go on foot. You don't need a boat, bitch. And you put it in there at nighttime, at dark time. And that's exactly where you would do it. But you know what's interesting that you want to bring this up, that, oh, why would somebody go frame him? Why are you putting out people's alibis? Why are you spreading his alibi out to the world? Where'd you get how are you even a cop, let alone a detective?
Was going up there when nobody was looking for Lacey. In addition to that, I see a lot of boaters down here, and most of them are not burglars. So to think that there's burglars that are out boating and things like that seems kind of suspicious.
I love that he said that too. I mean, I don't think a lot of burglars are boaters. Yeah, exactly. They didn't use a boat, you dumbass. They used their hoopty. Well, they're getting high off the meth that you guys are getting cuts of.
To me, that
your little CIs did this.
People would actually believe that.
They pretty much confessed to the burglary. They said, one of these guys was riding his bike around the day after Christmas and found that, or Christmas Day or the day after, and he sees this house is empty. And he breaks in and sees a safe, so he leaves and goes and gets his friend that has a truck, and they go back to the house and they steal the safe and they steal all the property. Well, after they got caught, they turned all of that stuff in. They turned in property from other burglaries that they had done.
There was a $500,000 reward that was leading for the.
Yeah, I want to know what was the date that when it up to $500,000. What was the date of that?
The return of Lacey, her uninjured recovery. And there was a $50,000 reward leading to the recovery of her remains if she was murdered or had met death some way. And nobody came forward to collect those rewards.
One lives with his mom and the other one lives with his mom in a shack in the back.
Oh my God. You guys are going to push this, that there was just these two? No, the one guy, the Todd guy, you guys cut a deal with. He was a third strike offender, which means he goes away for life. Third strike, you're out. Okay. Why did he only do 8 years? Because you guys changed the day of the burglary to the 26th. And he would say, yep, sure. And don't ever speak about this, because what? They gave you lots more information than what the fuck just transpired.
Yard. But I mean, they had alibis. People know where they are.
Who had alibis? You're still spreading this? You are still spreading that these people had alibis when we have people coming out in 2016 that are your own people, your own Copland world people. They're coming out and saying, yeah, no, I never checked their alibis. I never checked their alibis on the 24th. Listen to him. I cannot believe that he's going to say that.
In a shack in the backyard. But I mean, they had alibis. People know where they are on Christmas. I mean, all their alibis checked out. Their polygraphs were clean. They went.
Who is this guy? I love it. I didn't realize he was this bad in it. Oh my God, this is amazing. Oh my God, dude, your ass is so grass, bro. It's okay though.
Went to jail.
I'm here for it. I got a front row seat of brochetta, brochiti, bro you sucky. I'm gonna watch a front row seat of this. I can't believe that you're fucking Italian, man. You're killing my heritage.
For the burglaries. We recovered all kinds of property, but nothing from Lacey. That was the most thoroughly investigated burglary that we've done in a long time. It was thorough. And they went to jail.
You weren't even involved in that. That wasn't even your case. Because you wouldn't take it on. Brochetta, bro Chichi, bro little PP.
They did not want to go to jail with anybody thinking they were involved in that case. That was one thing both of them made perfectly clear.
Why were you in there? Were you there? Did you talk? Did you record those conversations? That's right. You burned them. You destroyed the interviews. You destroyed the safe. You destroyed the van. But most importantly, you destroyed all of the interviews with these people that they had on January 2nd. Why? You scared daddy? You had it destroyed on May 6th after your big powwow meeting.
There's certain crimes that people that get incarcerated don't care about. But there is a classification of crimes where if you abduct and kill a mother, a pregnant mother, you're not going to be looked upon too favorably by the other people that are locked up with you. And to think that these guys are going to jail. One of them had a warrant. Of course, they're both arrested for the burglary, and they know they're going to get locked up. They were almost begging to get polygraphs so that they could show the other inmates that they had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, you weren't even involved in this shit, bro. They were just begging to get polygraphed. Are you fucking on? Dude, who's supplying you what you're fucking smoking, man? Because the rest of the world wants it. Let's. How about, will you take a polygraph and do this all over again? Bet you won't.
All the property that was taken from the Medina burglary was recovered, and other property that wasn't even.
It wasn't all recovered, you scum. What?
Even associated with that burglary was recovered, because people that these burglars had sold that property to or given it to, they wanted away from that. And so other property that wasn't even.
Oh, is that when you told, you put it all out there, said, hey, anybody that has anything from the burglary of the Medina burglary, you guys can come to the police station and just drop it off, and there's no questions asked. Just bring it in. Is that when you guys did that? And there was this one lady that just ran in there and just threw stuff and hurry up and jetted. What are you, dude? You guys are run by fucking skinheads. Dude, skinheads ran your fucking town.
Associated with Medina's burglary was recovered. We even had a guy that came in the lobby of the police department with a bag full of stolen property, dumped it, masked up, ran out. They couldn't catch him because he went down the street.
Oh, you couldn't catch him. Listen to you. Oh, you couldn't catch him. You couldn't catch him because he went running down the street. And we just couldn't catch him. Well, then you guys suck. I mean, I can't believe you're admitting this. We couldn't catch him. I mean, he came in with a mask and fuck, it was Brian Kohlberger.
And this is the way people felt about this case. They didn't want to be anywhere near it to be dragged into it. As time went by, of course, a lot of people are trying to find reasonable doubt in Scott's guilt by claiming that, well, there was that burglary across the street. And we have that saying that there's no coincidences in homicide investigations, and that's generally true. And then people say, well, that's a coincidence, John. Well, it is, but when you take that by itself and then you compare it with all the other coincidences of the stack of circumstantial evidence against.
What stack, bro? What stack? Like, you keep saying this, like all this, you keep saying this, all these and these nevers and these always, all in this stack. What stack? Stack of what? Stack of what? I'm waiting. I think that the burglary across the street on the same day at the same time, I don't think that's a coincidence. No, I don't. Especially now that someone's come forward to sign their name on the dotted line with what they know. A lot of names popping up now.
Scott, the Medina burglary is pretty minor in comparison.
The Medina burglary is pretty minor. Okay. Dude, the Modesto skinhead gang is responsible for how many murders in that area? Just saying. How many?
I mean, those guys, like I said, they live in their backyard with their mother and ride bikes.
No,
There's
they won't.
$500,000 reward if they had Lacey somewhere in the shed with them. They're going to get turned in. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I
cannot believe that I cannot. The $500,000 reward. When was that a thing?
To carry $500 and I could buy
Listen
information.
Listen to him.
I used to in the shed with them. They're going to get turned in. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I used to carry $500 and I could buy information from any one of those guys for $100.
Told you they were CI. I told you I could buy anything I wanted from any one of those guys for $500. Listen to this guy. Dude, he was on the stand getting his ass fucking plowed. So was fucking the DA's bitch boy. I mean, who says this shit? I was always rolling with $500. What cop and detective roll around with $500 in their pocket? I could buy whatever I wanted for $100. I bet you couldn't buy a blowjob though.
And so that's ridiculous.
No, I didn't have to buy those.
Now, if you're doing property crime and you're stealing things from people's homes to support a drug habit or whatever you're using it for, to think that if more than one person knew about Lacey being abducted, to think that their loyalty would trump $500,000, well, you're looking at things differently than I do. I just don't see it happening.
You didn't talk to any of them.
Especially when rewards come out and people come.
Yes, they did talk, you sick son of a bitch. That's why you burnt the fucking tapes. You fucking liar. Why'd you got to burn the tapes? Why'd you have to get rid of the tapes? Because it was on there. Otherwise, you don't go burning tapes. You think you're just so confident to say this right now, huh? Buddy, I cannot wait. The LA Innocence Project just destroyed you. You and all your bros.
Forward for $50.
He could buy him for 50. Other guy's like 100. Get out of here.
We're getting calls of.
Oh, wait, here. She never said this. Scott was loading something into the bed of his backed up truck near a side entrance into the house. I just read that for you guys. That is an absolute lie. Whoever wrote this up for this production, because this just came out 2 weeks ago. Whoever wrote this up right here, I mean, did the police do this? Because I think that they did this themselves. I think the police put this out. Who made this crap? Absolute dog shit.
We're getting calls of people seeing a pregnant lady walking a dog. So
you didn't go and check on any of that.
Had to knock on a lot of doors. We interviewed a lot of people.
When? What are you talking? Oh my God! Listen to this part. They went and found Lacey lookalikes.
We found 2 other pregnant ladies that were walking their dogs on Christmas. They were interviewed. Nobody could.
None of them were walking their dog. Oh wait, walking there on Christmas. Yeah, this happened on Christmas Eve, buddy. You do not know that? Do you think that she was taken on Christmas Day?
Positively say they saw Lacey.
That's
walking
not true.
A dog.
In a
These
nutshell, there was, I believe it was about a 20-minute time window between when Scott left and when Karen's service put the dog in the backyard. And so the skeptics want the reasonable doubt to reflect that during that period of time, Lacey had come back from the walk, had seen the burglary taking place across the street, confronted the burglars in the van. She'd been abducted in the van, tossed in there, and taken away. Well, it's interesting. You've got all these different people that come forward and claim they saw Lacey walking that day and in a variety of different locations, all these different sightings. But when you scrutinize it a little bit more, none of the people that claimed they saw Lacey that day knew her before that day.
Oh my God,
So
that's
they
a
couldn't
lie.
make a match on familiar facial recognition the way you could if
Oh my God. Now that's a flat out lie. Right there. That's a lie. Oh my God.
you see your neighbor day in and day out.
There's a lady missing and you want to be helpful. Nobody's being, they weren't like being sinister or nothing. They really saw a pregnant lady walking a dog. They called it in. But when you show them a photo lineup, or if you show them,
You didn't show them shit. You never called them back. What do you mean when you show them a lineup? Dude, did your brother make this video for you? Like he looks like he has like those little doggy eyes. Look at him right like that. You know those doggy eyes? You guys know what I'm talking about in the cartoons.
do you know Lacey? Well, they didn't know her.
But in addition to that, there were 3 other gals attractive that walked the neighborhood, 2 of which were pregnant.
Dude,
One
this
had
guy can't get his head off of females living alone. Attractive. It's attractive.
a chocolate lab.
Really, because one of the women said that it was a fat woman. Yeah, she could have been pregnant. She looked like she was fat. How about that? Look at this guy.
One had a golden retriever. Easily could have been mistaken as Lacey by somebody who's not specifically familiar with any of those gals. And so when it comes to that, intentions oftentimes are good, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes people just want to get involved in the big thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And there might be
On
some of that
Christmas.
going on here.
Like if you knew a person walking, you'd recognize them and you'd say, yeah, okay, that's my neighbor walking her dog. But if you didn't know them, you'd just call in and say you saw a pregnant lady. So there was
15 people in a 1/3 of a square mile. 15 people in this little area. It wasn't like they were giving you, hey, yeah, I saw her and it was like 5 miles that way and then like 10 miles that way. And then like, oh yeah, I saw her and she was like, oh yeah, she's down by San Diego. No, bitch. It was all in this little area that made it, I think it was like 1/3 of us. It was something ridiculously small. And that's why were able to get this expert. And what an idiot.
there was no credible Lacey sightings. None.
How did you determine that? I don't know. I got my ass handed to me on cross. I don't remember. I was on the stand for, 8 days. He was on the stand for like 8 days, or the other guy was on the stand for, one of them, was on the stand for 8 days. Search warrant time. God, these people get my blood boiling. There you go. Yes, it is, Tina. Yeah. I'm telling you, whoever did this had access to a lot of things.
When Al Brocchini first looked in the warehouse on Christmas Eve, he went there with Scott. And Scott told Al that there was no power in the warehouse, so they couldn't.
Can you just believe these lies? Yo, bro, there's no power here, man. Sorry, man. There's no power here. What? Like, he never said that. There's no recording of him saying that because you guys didn't record anything allegedly.
Couldn't turn on the lights inside the warehouse. Al chalked that up to that there was no power in the warehouse section, but not necessarily the office, which would have allowed Scott to use his computer and things like that. So Al turned his headlights into the warehouse, and there was the aluminum boat that was on the trailer. But in addition to that aluminum boat, there was a flatbed trailer that was rectangular, had the wheels, and it had
Look at that. Look at
wood
that.
on the
Look at
floor
that.
of it.
Where's the
This
cement?
was used for hauling fertilizer because Scott sold fertilizer. On this flatbed trailer,
Mhm.
Al looked and he saw what he believed to be 4 to 5 crescent-shaped rings that were about the size of like a coffee can or a bucket that one would use if they mixed up ready-mix cement and poured it into the bucket to harden it to make homemade anchors that people often use on boats when they're fishing in fresh water. As the cement is curing into concrete, they take a U-shaped bend of reinforcing bar, they call it rebar, and they stick it down into the cement itself. So you have a loop, which is going to be locked into the concrete once it hardens. Of course, you can tie a rope to that, throw it over the side of the boat. There's your anchor. And there was one anchor that was found in the boat, found in the.
There you guys go. There's a finally they wanted to admit something that's accurate. There is that not all these anchors were gone, and Scott didn't have an anchor. There was the one anchor that he made, and it was there. And the bucket, there was no Bracemi. He said that Scott used this like pitcher, like to like pour like a
front of the boat. Bucket wasn't on it. We never did recover the bucket. Don't know where.
bucket wasn't on the bucket wasn't on it. The bucket wasn't. No shit, the bucket wasn't on it. I mean, what are you gonna keep that? It has. What are you gonna do? Probably pitch it. I don't know. What can you do with it at that point? I don't know.
That is, suspect it's probably on the bottom of San Francisco Bay.
Oh, it's on the bottom of the bay. That's right.
But the funny thing about the anchor that was in the front of Scott's boat,
Wait, did you find it on the bottom of the bay? No. Okay, just making sure.
is there was no anchor rope for it. And an anchor really isn't going to do you a lot of good if you're anchoring your boat if you don't have a rope to attach it to. So just little things like this make detectives suspicious, and it puts us in a position where we need to look at these things a little bit further. But as they start to mount up, they start to be more than just interesting. They start to become kind of compelling.
Mm. Yeah.
I've been asked the question of why the Peterson case has become so big. And for us, working murders, 140 of them, I think, is a little more than 140 when I retired.
God, people need to go fucking pull every fucking case that this man has ever worked.
We had a lot of interesting cases, a lot of intriguing cases, and this wasn't really necessarily in the top 10 of really intriguing cases.
Oh my God. This wasn't even the top 10. Look, I would love to know your top 10, sir, because we need to take a look at these interesting cases to you. Because they gotta be the most fucked up things I've ever heard about. I mean, somebody get this man's name. Okay, John Bueller. Find out what cases he was on.
It was the media interest in it made it kind of what it was. Slow news cycle. I don't know. Maybe there wasn't much going on that the news people could, grab onto. But you throw on top of it, it's the holiday season. You've got a girl who's pregnant, and of course, there's an enormous
Yes, it was meant to be a gift.
Amount of people that are watching the news that can identify with that, put themselves in that position. You've got an attractive victim. You've got an attractive husband. You've got a mystery, and
Dude, this guy's the horniest thing I've ever heard talk. You got an attractive victim. You have an attractive suspect here. And we have a very horny detective.
Local news grabbed onto it. I had heard in the past that there were family members that had notified the major network, or at least one of the major networks, and mentioned this case because they had a contact there in New York or someplace back east, and that might have kickstarted the national interest in the case.
No.
But with that, of course, the way the media works is they don't want to be the ones left out of a big story, so they all pile on top of it and grab for every bite they can get.
Mm-hmm. You guys were given
it made our job a little bit more difficult because there was a lot of things that we wouldn't have had to do if the media hadn't been so attracted to this case. It created a lot of wild goose chases that we had to go down that we knew were probably ridiculous from the start. We had a lot of people that wanted to get involved in this case that had nothing to do with it. I
Woohoo!
remember there was one person that claimed they'd seen Lacey in a grocery store up in Washington, and the local authorities up there spent an enormous amount of time reviewing videotape and things like that. And they finally determined that this person was making it up. And you get a lot of people that come forward. I remember all the psychics that would call, and it would be interesting. They'd call and they'd want to, well, who am I talking to? And I'm thinking to myself, well, you're the psychic. You ought to know who you're talking to.
I'll give you that one, John. You got me there, buddy. Well, you're the fucking psychic. Who you think it is? Well, I don't know, because you're two-faced.
And they'd always say things like, well, we believe her remains are in salt water or something like that. And it's like, well, that's helpful. 3/4 of the surface of the earth is covered in salt water, so that doesn't narrow it down much. But we had to spend time with all those people, and it took up a lot of investigative time to put those things together. You can't leave them. You can't leave those things hanging because the defense is pretty sharp most of the time. And if they see that you didn't do something that you should have.
You didn't give any time to people that saw her, even just like, you didn't take any time to go to what about the van that caught fire the next morning? And it didn't catch fire. It was fucking set on fire at 2 different places of that van. So we have a burglary across the street from where Lacey is taken, and they talk about a van, okay? And then the next morning, on Christmas morning, the van is lit on fire, set on fire in the airport district where all those fucking heathens are. But none of this is connected.
Done, and it looks one-sided that you're only going after Scott, then they're going to attack you viciously in court. And the funny thing about Scott is, for the first several days, like first week or so, we couldn't find anything wrong with this guy. I mean, he was just the all-American boy, college student. He's got the baby.
Do you hear how offensive he hates it, like with college kids? The college student, that like makes you special. Like the college student. And you know what? In this reading, one of the guys actually makes a comment about oh, you college, blah, blah, blah. Like here, just to hear him say that. College. Fuck. What?
He was just the all-American boy, college student. He's got the baby on the way. He's got the pretty wife. He's belongs to the country club. He's got all these things going.
Were you jealous of Scott Peterson?
This circle of friends, and just nobody had a bad word to say about him until Amber came forward.
We almost like hit a lull in the investigation right at the end of December.
Amber was a hoe. Scott had sex with her day that he met her. Okay. Hooked with her, banged her, and then lied to her over and over and over. And they talked from November 19th to December. Last time he saw her was December 14th, November 19th. Yeah. This person, Amber, put Scott on Christmas cards. Their picture was on Christmas cards. What? Scott, that's not his first time he stuck his dick in something that was not Lacey, okay? Everybody needs to know that because it's the truth that came out in trial.
Beginning of January, and we were in the office, and we had a tip line up 24 hours a day, and I was standing behind one of our clerks, Bev, and she was typing, and I was reading over her shoulder, and she's typing, Scott Peterson's my boyfriend. I met him on November 20th, and he calls me every day, and I like, Bev, is that lady on the phone? And she said, yeah. And so I took the phone from her, and it was a gal. She says her name was Amber Fry, and she said she's dating Scott Peterson, and that's her boyfriend. And I said, does he know you're calling? And she said, no. I said, well, don't tell him.
And Al got a couple more tidbits from her and said, we're on our way. don't go anywhere. And she said, yeah, I'll wait for you guys.
Yeah.
So he grabs me. We go into the sergeant's office and we tell Al Carter,
No,
we've got this lead down in Fresno. And
where'd you think she was going to go? She's in Fresno. But you know.
Al said, go. Just don't tell anybody about it.
Detective
Go. Al.
Bueller and I let our sergeant and Detective Grogan know where we're going, and we drove straight to.
Rogan's like, yeah, I got these two guys out of my hair. Now get over here, DA lady. How you want it tonight? He was banging the DA. God, these people are all wild.
Her house and met with her and her friend.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of these guys had sex with Amber.
Sean Sibley, that had introduced Scott to Amber. And from there, she told us a story that was pretty incredible.
Because we're trying to keep kind of a clamp on.
What was that incredible story? I want to hear that again. What was the incredible story that they fucked day one? That's pretty incredible.
Details like this because we don't want it getting out. We get to Amber's place and she's got her friend Sean Sibley there with her, and Sean is Amber's friend who had introduced Scott to Amber. Sean had been at a pest convention for agricultural pest convention down in Anaheim, I think in like November or something like that, or October, and she had met Scott down there along with other people that were involved in fertilizer and pest things for agriculture. And Scott had projected himself at this convention that he was single and he was looking for a girlfriend and things like that. And Sean started talking.
How was he able to do that? Think about that. How was he able to say that he was single if he's with work people? Like, this can't be the story.
She was engaged, so she wasn't interested in him. And she said, she thought of Amber and she, I got this friend. She's really nice, but, don't break her heart. Don't treat her like garbage. And Scott has he's very engaging. He's charming and things like
Very engaging. He's charming.
that. And so he ends up contacting Amber. They start dating. And
they start dating? They just met and they had sex. And then they would meet those 4 other times after that first time and have sex. And then, he was just strangling her along, says he was banging her.
And when we get down to Amber's place, she starts telling us about how he started romancing her from the start by bringing her roses. And he had strawberries and champagne in his room at the Sheraton or the Radisson, whatever he was staying at.
November 20th.
Sounds like an escort service.
Scott said he was not married. It was a blind date. Scott asked Amber, hey, do you mind coming up to my room so I can clean up and change and go to dinner? And so she agreed, and he woed her. And then they went to dinner. And
and then what?
And that's their dating relationship started right then on November 20th.
And it just...
Oh, they just went to dinner, huh? No, they didn't.
Just kind of took off from there. He told her that he lived in...
It just took off from there. Oh. Just the week before Thanksgiving. Okay.
Sacramento, but his office was in Modesto, and he traveled a lot and fed her these stories about overseas travel, and part of it was probably
better
true,
stories,
but not all of it. And he mentioned to her that he was going to be having a lot of travel during the holidays and through January, but he was going to be available for a lot more time together after the end of January. And she is just digging all this because she's looking for a good guy. She's a single mother. I think her daughter was about 2 years old at the time. And Scott was very attentive with her daughter and all that. And Amber was interesting to talk to because I got the impression she didn't think that we would believe her on this. And so she had wine corks they'd had bottles of wine at dinner, and she had programs from events they had gone to and things like this. And so she's showing us all these items that...
She's a fucking stage 5 clinger. Oh my God, she was saving the bottles, the cork bottles? I didn't know that. Oh my God. She was saving the cork wine bottles? And the what? The programs? Like what? They went to like a play or something?
And things like this. And so she's showing us all these items that confirm that they had been going to dinner and doing all these different things. And we really had no reason to disbelieve her at this point. Sean Sibley, we interviewed them separately, recorded, of course, and she provided the same
You're recording them, but you didn't record Scott ever. I can't.
same information, but not with as much detail as Amber did. And then what we found out throughout all this is Amber didn't watch television. And Fresno was not in the Sacramento market for media coverage. So at the beginning, before the news coverage got giant, she wouldn't have caught it anyway because she wasn't watching TV. But a friend of hers who was a Fresno cop, he'd caught the coverage and he had remembered that she was dating a guy named Scott Peterson. And so he had told her that you probably ought to get a hold of these Modesto cops. The guy you're dating could be the same guy that's involved in this missing thing. And so that's why she finally called us. And when we finished up with the interview, we had pretty much all the information we need. At that time, we were going to go eat lunch. So we asked them if Sean and Amber wanted to go with us. We figured, well, if we're eating and they're eating with us, they might come up with some other things that we remember and we can jot those down too. Before we went to the restaurant, Amber comes out with this little jewel out of left field, totally unexpected. And she goes, should be interested in some pictures.
Would you be interested in some pictures? Of what? His ding dong? Yes.
And I'm thinking, well, what? And she said, well, it's like,
I bet you were like, what?
She goes, should be interested in some pictures. And I'm thinking, well, what? And she said, well, if Scott and I, it's like, yeah, we'd probably be interested in those. And so we go to Rite Aid or CVS, Walgreens, I don't remember which it was. And she gives a claim ticket to the gal behind the counter. And she comes out with this envelope that's got the double pictures. So it's got photo prints, but doubles. And, this is kind of before cell phone camera stuff was out there. And we open these things up and here they are. Scott in the tuxedo, Amber in the red dress. I mean, just a whole slew of these pictures. Them sitting on the couch. He's whispering in her ear, all this ridiculousness. And these are just epic. Anybody who's probably watching this probably saw those pictures. And so, yeah, it's kind of locked in at that time that she wasn't full of, baloney. She was telling the truth. And we said, yeah, we'll take these pictures. That'll be good.
As soon as we saw the photo of him at the Christmas party with Amber, and after interviewing Amber, and she's telling us all these stories and gifts and cards and things, and they're all coming from Scott's shop. And the fact that she even told us the first day that Scott had told her on December 9th that he lied to her originally when he said he wasn't married. And he broke down and he was sobbing and she was consoling him. And he had said he lost his wife and this was going to be the first holiday without her. And when we get to the drugstore, right next door is a Radio Shack. And I said, well, if he calls you every day, do you mind? I'm going to go buy you a tape recorder, some tapes and a wire. You plug it in your phone. And she said, okay. And so I bought it.
And we didn't really know what her alliance was at that time, but she called us. So we thought it's probably worth a gamble.
And I'm plugging it in her phone for her. And I'm showing her, okay, when he calls, push these two buttons. And sure enough, the phone rings right while I'm holding it. And it's him.
The number shows up on her screen. Al recognizes the number. I didn't. And so Al told her, we'll take that call. And so she did. So she started talking to him.
And I said, Amber, you're on, and don't tell him that we're here. And she talked to him like she was his girlfriend, and she did a great job. And after when we left, I left her with a whole bunch of tapes, and I just asked her to, every time he calls you, to tape it for us, and we'd pick them up.
I'm finally calmed down from it, so. I'm sorry, baby. We're so good for you. miss you too.
I miss you. You don't deserve any pain or any heartache or any arguments or anything.
So then why don't you tell me something good?
And I'll tell you how wonderful you are. That's pretty easy to do. How thoughtful you are. How amazing. You know, I always call you, I tell you you're special.
Well, she didn't know it at that time, but we already had a court-ordered wire intercept going on Scott's phone, so that call was going to be picked up anyway.
Our next thing was to record Scott's conversations, follow him, continue zeroing in on him. That was my job. Other people did other things, but my job was to stay with Scott, clear him of any.
Okay. You guys want to hear something crazy? Now, this guy, Matt Dalton, went and interviewed Amber Fry's sister. Chapter 8. Amber Fry. Okay. I don't think it's that. Where's the part about her sister? Oh, here we go. At the time, however, we felt we had to do whatever we could to show that Amber was not and could not have ever provided a motive for murder. Our initial inquiry regarding Amber Fry led us to her sister, Ava. This is his investigator back in the day. Ava Fry lived in Modesto, not far from the Peterson house. We met at the DoubleTree in Modesto. Ava carried a tiny poodle, which she held throughout the interview. Much of what she told me about her sister seemed motivated by what was then a contentious relationship between them. Ava told me that she could name several relationships in which Amber fell in love with a man after only knowing the man for a short period of time. When Amber began dating Peterson, Ava told their mother that Amber was once again falling head over heels for someone she hardly knew. She and her mother discussed the probability of Peterson being married since he never seemed to be around. Peterson was not the first married man with whom Amber had been involved, and they did not want to see that happen again. Did Amber know that Scott was married? Well, according to Ava, the family was suspicious enough that they hired an investigator after Amber began seeing him. I don't know whether the statement made by Ava was true. I heard nothing else about it. What I do know is that when Amber put a photo of Peterson and herself in her Christmas cards after dating him only 3 times, her family was concerned that she would get hurt falling yet again for another unavailable man. Huh. What the picture that we just saw of a grinning Scott Peterson with another woman at a party while his lovely pregnant wife had spent that evening attending a party alone had to have a devastating effect on potential jurors. Regardless of whether or not Amber suspected that Peterson was married, on December 29th, she learned from her friend Richard Beard, a Fresno homicide detective, that Scott was a suspect in his wife's disappearance. She didn't call Peterson and ask for an explanation. She called the Modesto police. So this fucking shit that we're hearing, I didn't know when I was going to bring this out, but again, on December 29th, she learned from her friend Richard Beard, B-Y-R-D, like bird, a Fresno homicide detective, that Scott was a suspect in his wife's disappearance. Again, she didn't call Peterson and ask for an explanation. She called the Modesto police. Ava also said that her sister refused to let her look at the script the police had given her for use in taping Scott's telephone calls at the request. In these calls, Scott consistently denied involvement with Lacey's disappearance. That's why I want to hear all 3,000. We hear the same 2 calls. She told me that Amber said that there were instances when she taped Scott and didn't give the tapes to the police. I'm not going to go into all of the charges Ava made against her sister, since most of them do not pertain to the Peterson case. Once the affair itself was established, it did not advance the case of Peterson to discredit or demean Amber Fry any more than it would have helped Bill Clinton to attack the morality of Monica Lewinsky. This is how I know this dude is so fair. Amber had a history of making poor decisions where men were concerned. Scott was another poor decision. It was a poor decision for each of them, perhaps a fatal one for Scott Peterson. There is nothing that I saw, however, that indicates that Scott's extramarital affairs as a plural, because this is not the first time, impacted upon his relationship with his wife. All of Scott and Lacey's friends with whom I spoke confirmed that he treated Lacey extremely well. Standing up when she entered a room, obeying her request to take out the garbage, never interrupting her. No one ever heard him raise his voice. They described the couple as being like best friends. I learned nothing in my investigating that indicated to me that Scott's interest in Amber Fry was anything but transitory. In his summation to the jury, Mark Yarrigo said that he thought Scott was honest in his interview with Diane Sawyer when he said that he respected Amber and that he continued to call Amber after their relationship was revealed because he wanted her to believe he was innocent while others were turning against him. He described the relationship as a friendship. Instead of focusing so much on Amber Fry's relationship to the case, the real effort should have been on getting the case to a preliminary hearing to determine if there was sufficient evidence to hold Peterson for trial. California law requires that a hearing be held within 10 days after a defendant has pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. This is to prevent lengthy pretrial incarceration for someone in a custodial situation, as Scott was, or to assure a reasonable, prompt resolution, if appropriate, for those accused of crimes, whether or not in and out of custody. This right can be waived by the defendant, and Scott reluctantly agreed to continuances because of delays in our defense teams being provided with much of the discovery material. In my opinion, it would have been more appropriate to proceed to the preliminary hearing and put on the stand our eyewitnesses who would testify that they saw a woman identified as Lacey Peterson walking a dog on December 24th. This could have refuted the prosecution's entire case. The testimony of one of the witnesses, elderly neighbor Vivian Mitchell, has been lost forever because of her death. If there is ever a retrial of this case, it will be a question then if the others are still available. If they had testified at the preliminary hearing, their testimony would have been preserved even if they were later unavailable. Scott remained confident that the entire matter would be straightened out. They won't convict me because I didn't do it, he told me. He did not know that this was not always enough. Scott Peterson, innocent. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for joining.